Good afternoon, everyone. This is our Tuesday, July 25th regular Board of County Commissioners work session. And we're going to start off with a U.S. Forest Service update on the draft record of decision for the environmental assessment of the Maroon Bell Snowmass Wilderness Overnight Visitors Management Plan, and probably touch on a few other topics as well. So welcome.
Thank you. Did you want to start, Ellen? You want me to jump in?
I'd say we only have 1.5 hour on the agenda for Karen Schroyer, so I would gladly just turn it over to you.
Okay. Is this
on? We'll have a little time here anyway. We'll make up some time because it's not often we get the Forest Service here, and we want to take advantage of her.
Then I was just asked to introduce myself, Ellen Sassano, Long Range Planner for Pickens County. And I will add, if we have a minute, that in addition to the items that are in your packet, Karen Schroyer, who is the Aspen-Sopris District Ranger for the White River National Forest, will also be updating us on the White Banks Alabaster Mine, just the status of permit compliance there, and that mine is located up Avalanche Creek. And with that, I will turn it over to Karen.
Thanks, Ellen. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all again. As most of you know, we did come out with a draft decision on the Maroon Bell Snowmass Wilderness Plan, and we are currently in a 45-day objection period. That objection period ends on August 12th, and those people who have commented on the plan and the analysis in the past have the opportunity to object to the draft decision. If we don't receive any objections during the 45-day period, we will be having Scott Fitzwilliams, our forest supervisor, sign the final decision. And I wanted to update you folks on just a couple of tweaks that we made to the management plan with this draft decision from the last time I visited with you. So the last time I visited with you, I think we talked about 5 potential management zones out of the 30 zones that we've identified in the Maroon Bell Snowmass Wilderness. 5 of them are eligible based on this adaptive management plan for limited overnight use permitting. And we tweaked that plan just a little bit once we started looking at it and realized that looking at these 5 zones that have exceeded their capacity at least 3 out of the last 5 years, if we set up a limited use permitting system in each of those zones, but we don't take into account the travel corridors in adjacent zones that are approaching those zones, that we may get some problems with displacement and having people camp just outside of the limited use zone and create some resource issues just outside of those zones. And so based on a lot of information, again, that we've gathered over the last decade or two with our registration system and our wilderness rangers being out there, we made the decision to add a few more zones to the limited overnight permitting system. And I'll explain what those are. In your handout, I've said that with Phase 1, if the decision is signed, we will be looking at limiting overnight use at Conundrum Hot Springs, which we've been talking about for years, but also the Conundrum Creek corridor leading up to Conundrum Hot Springs. We realized if we don't do that, we're going to have just a lot of displacement and impact issues right outside the Conundrum Hot Springs zone. So during Phase 1 of our implementation of this plan, we will be limiting overnight use in those 2 zones. Phase 2 would include limiting overnight use on the entire 4-pass loop, which includes Crater, Maroon, and Capitol Lake, which we identified before, but it also includes the East Fork, the North Fork, and then the Upper Snowmass zones, which kind of complete the 4-pass loop. And so each of those zones in Phase 2 of our implementation will have limited overnight permitting. And then Phase 3 right now is looking at Lower Capitol Creek, which is the travel corridor leading to Capitol Lake, and the Capitol Lake zone. So that's the biggest tweak to the plan that I wanted to make sure you all understood before a final decision is signed. We are also looking at requiring wag bags at the conundrum area rather than just having a voluntary program, actually requiring that in the future. And the capacity, specifically in the conundrum zones, since we're looking at that first, the capacity is going to be based on the number of sites that we establish in those zones. And those sites are based on that groups at one time capacity that we determined through this adaptive management plan. So right now, Conundrum Hot Springs Zone has a capacity of 20 groups at one time, for instance. And the current group size limit for the entire wilderness areas is 10 people per group. But we're realizing that we can't put 200 people at a time in the Conundrum Hot Springs Zone. So we're going to base the capacity of each of those groups on the capacity of the sites that they'll be camping at. And that's going to be determined over the next month or so. Our wilderness rangers are going to go up there and do some site analysis on the established sites that are already up there and how many people can they hold. Probably going to be based on tents, and then, whether it's a 2-person tent or a 3-person tent, that's yet to be figured out. But we're definitely not going to be seeing a limit of 200 people a night around the Conundrum Hot Springs Zone. So I'm hoping you're all supportive of that. We really appreciate the letter to the editor that George sent in, and in support of the management plan. And I wanted to see if any of you had any questions on it before we move on.
Patty, then Steve.
Just a question, and maybe more for the public, but when you say limited overnight permitting, does that mean the number of permits, but how many nights?
Great question. We're also looking at what is the number of nights we want to limit overnight use to. And
to the same party.
Exactly, for the same party. So we're right now looking at maybe a 3 to 4 night limit. And
okay. Does that
maybe
make sense?
during hunting season that might get extended, because we know that we occasionally have hunters in that zone that want to spend a little bit more time, not necessarily to use the hot springs, but for their hunting.
Base camp out of.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet.
Steve?
Karen, how do you anticipate people picking up and paying for the permits?
Yeah, great question. So we are right now working with recreation.gov, and we are really hoping that that they're going to be able to get a system set up for us in recreation.gov by February. It's tight. Our time frame is very tight, and so it's not a guarantee yet, but our plan is to use recreation.gov so all of the reservations can be made online. They currently charge a $10 fee per reservation, not per night, but per reservation. Yeah.
Greg?
I was hoping you could clarify a little bit more. You had identified, 20 sites, 10 people per site. Historically, could you enlighten us a little bit about what the historic numbers you've seen are, and what you anticipate the actual numbers may be when you get the metrics on the campsites themselves? Yeah,
that's historically we have on very busy weekends, say a July holiday weekend or a Labor Day holiday weekend, a conundrum, we can see upwards of 200 to 250 people a night up there. And so with this new allocation that we're establishing right now, we're probably going to be looking at more like 60 to 80 max.
Okay, thank you.
Night. Yeah.
Karen, I think the Forest Service has shown great success in terms of educating the public, even last year with the requiring the beer-proof food canisters throughout the wilderness areas. With the reservation system, again, because people, this may not go into effect until February, people are planning or perhaps coming next summer. they're used to the old system if they were at least followed that in terms of requiring the overnight permit. So it's a little more far-reaching in terms of trying to get to people ahead prior to knowing that they'll have to have a reservation, otherwise they won't be able to go into those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And we realize we're cutting it short, and we realize we're going to have some bumps in the road as we proceed with this implementation. We are. The good sign is that we're getting a lot of phone calls already at the district offices asking about permits for Conundrum. So the word is out that this is going to be happening and that things are changing. We can't technically get any signs put up at the trailhead until we have a final decision signed. But as soon as that final decision is signed, we'll start getting signs up at the trailheads. We are also working closely with our local vendors, the local outdoor shops, to help us pass the word out. Getting stories in the Front Range newspapers and the Front Range television stations has helped. Getting the word out beyond Colorado is tough, and we're going to keep working on that. But like I said, I'm sure we're going to have some bumps to get through.
Yeah.
So.
Greg?
I just wanted to ask about the WAG bags.
Yeah.
Give us some more information on those if you could.
So a WAG bag is a disposable bag that you can purchase for around $2.50 that you will use to dispose of your human waste. And I didn't start using them until a couple of years ago, I'll be honest, but they are pretty awesome little things. They're well established in many wilderness areas, and the concept is you use the WAG bag to collect your human waste and you carry it all the way out and dispose of it in your own trash can. And that's the concept with a WAG bag. Right now we do have free WAG bags that we offer at the Conundrum Trailhead. And we'll do our best to continue to offer some of those, but there's not going to be enough to go around. People are going to have to plan ahead and purchase them. Yeah.
And where can they be purchased?
They can be purchased at any outdoor store.
So
Yeah.
the public knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. And so the final comment period is over, coming up in August?
August 12th.
August 12th. And so depending on if you get comments or don't get comments, the part of that next process?
So the objection period ends August 12th, and if we get no objections, then we will sign, Scott will sign the final decision probably the following week, and we can begin with planning and implementation to move forward. If we do get objections during that objection period, then there's another 45-day period that we have to go through in order to work with those whatever parties are objecting to try to resolve any objections that come in.
Yeah, good. Well, as I mentioned in my article, this is well overdue. It's the idea of people going into the wilderness to actually enjoy a wilderness experience has not really happened in places like Conundrum, which has really become a party atmosphere. And so I really applaud you for the work that you've done and Scott to move this forward. And I think I'm sure we'll be successful. I'm sure people will, once they understand why this is in place, I'm sure people will appreciate it as well. So thank you.
You bet. And the one last thing I wanted to say about that is that we also hope to partner with the county in the future in terms of some monitoring and just be able to measure the effectiveness of this as we move forward, whether it be water quality, parking lot issues, anything. We are happy to partner with the county on any of that to try to monitor the effectiveness of this plan. So.
Good. Greg?
I wanted to ask a little bit more about the water quality monitoring. It sounds like that's something coming, and I really would love to see more about that. I also noticed something in here regarding capacity related to parking. and enforcement of parking. And I'm hoping you can enlighten us a little bit about what you're thinking regarding enforcement of parking violations, and that the capacity of the parking areas may determine a lot.
Yeah, and parking is a tough one because, we can enforce parking on a trailhead that's on national forest, but when it starts spilling out onto a county road, our enforcement stops there. So, and a lot of the parking issues we're dealing with are from day use, not overnight use. So I do expect that's going to continue to be an issue that we're going to have to work together on.
And the county is anticipating working as a partner with the Forest Service, particularly on that parking issue at the Conundrum Creek trailhead. So, yeah, that's on our radar, and we will try to collect some data and respond accordingly.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to know how many are actually utilizing it for day parking versus overnight, because that's more of a hike to get in and out in a day that the normal person would do.
Yeah, agreed. There's a lot of dog walkers going up that creek.
Oh, so just part way, they're just walking
Yeah.
up, coming out.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand, yeah.
So would that be an area then when we could do a joint enforcement type of issue like we did at North Star, where the county could get authority or vice versa or both, so who is ever there could actually enforce on both jurisdictions? So that's an IGA or something in the future like we've done in the past. Okay.
That is a potential outcome, yes.
I'm just saying that seems to be working
Yeah.
well. In other places, it might work well here.
Yeah.
Steve?
The Snowmass Lake Trailhead is similar to the Conundrum one in that it's too small and that spills over down the road. And if we can come up with a good workable solution at Conundrum, we might be able to apply the same ideas and solutions to the Snowmass Lake one. And that's the same thing where there's a lot of day hikers going up there, as well as people going overnight. So.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I'll be looking at Conundrum. If we can solve Conundrum first, that would be good.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Good point. It's incredible how it's spreading.
All right, well, thanks for the update on that adaptive management plan, and we've got a little time, so
right.
give us an update on the Alabaster.
Yeah, I want to give you an update on White Banks Mine. I know some of you are asking, and we've actually had some neighbors in the area give us a call too and ask what's going on. For those of you not familiar with White Banks Mine, it's an alabaster mine, but also has some potential for a mineral, a hard rock mineral that is being labeled as a black marble. And a plan of operation was approved for the permittee in 2015. So they're currently in a development phase that lasts through May of 2019, and that is for full-scale alabaster exploration, development and production, and then some limited marble exploration that will be used to help determine this mineral classification. And he has not begun operations yet. I'll just make that clear. So we signed the plan of operations in May of in 2015, but operations have not begun. He had contacted us in December of 2016 and said, I'm going to begin winter operations soon. And so we sat down and realized that he still had some steps that he needs to complete before he can begin operations. And right now he's working with MSHA, the Mining Safety and Health Administration, to meet their standards in terms of safety for underground mining. And once those are approved, we are waiting for a plan that he will submit for a design for about a 1/10 of a mile road reroute around that permit area. I do feel strongly that if he's going to begin operations and he'll have trucks running up and down that road on a regular basis to haul these rocks, that we've got a safety issue with recreationists driving directly through the permit area. So I'm waiting for him to submit a design plan from a local engineering firm that he's hired, and we'll take a look at that design for rerouting that road so that the general public can drive around the permit area and boundary. And that's where we're at with that right now. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can tell you. Oh, he's also working with MSHA on a secondary escapeway, and they have to approve that escapeway for underground mining operations. Once that escapeway is approved, then we will determine the level of access that will be necessary to that escapeway, and it may be as simple as a two-track ATV trail. It may not even need to be a trail because it's basically for emergency access only. So that's where we're at with that. Any questions?
Two questions. One, so he's got an approved access plan from CDOT for egress on and off of 133 there?
Yes. Yes.
And another question is, I remember that although we had objected to it, the permit is for year-round winter mining as well. And I forgot, as part of that winter plan, is there monitoring of the bighorn sheep in that area?
You know, I'm not sure if that's written into the decision, George. I'd have to look. But there, you know, there's no question in my mind that we'd want to continue. We would want to monitor the effects of this to the bighorn sheep in the area, because I know they do migrate down there to the avalanche area in the winter. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. The one other thing I did want to add is that an inspection was done on the bridge that crosses Avalanche Creek, and it was determined to be plenty strong and capable of handling the truckloads that'll be going over that. And he's authorized, I believe it's up to 5 round-trip truckloads a day at this point during this exploration phase. Yeah. He is currently in compliance with this permit, and we're just waiting for a proposal on the road reroute at this point.
And that permit expires 2019?
May of 2019
May
for
2019.
Exploration.
Okay.
So then, does it come back for full review after May, or?
So May of 2019, this development phase expires. If the black marble is determined a locatable mineral, then we would be looking at going into a production phase where he could mine for both the alabaster and the black marble. If the black marble is not determined to be a locatable mineral, meaning there's no market for it, then he would still have the opportunity to move forward with alabaster production.
And thank you for keeping the neighbors informed now.
You bet.
That's important, because they're the ones who've been calling us.
Yeah, it is important. You bet. And I've encouraged him to do the same, communicate with the neighbors and keep them informed.
Thank you.
So.
Any other questions on the alabaster mine? So while you're here, Karen, two things. One, we've received a request from Senator Bennett's staff to write a letter of support for his proposed bill allowing the Forest Service to lease out some of the properties that they're not being utilized for housing or other administrative uses. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
You're not? Okay. You won't be much of a help then.
Yeah, sorry.
But,
it's a
but
lease?
maybe Ellen, because would that sort of take into account our current arrangement with the Forest Service where we're leasing, the 8th Street station for our open space and trails? Would that be part of the context of that bill, or?
Yeah, since unfortunately I don't know the details of how that existing cooperative use is structured, so I don't know if the bill that the senator is considering proposing will specifically address that property or not. I do have some
Okay.
information.
We being asked for a letter of support?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, I'm just trying to find this.
I think I have it too. I may have it here. Let me check.
I know that we've been pushing as a forest to be able to get the authority to do some enhanced use leasing in the future, which is the Aspen office is prime for that. It would allow us to lease out a building. It would allow a separate party to come in and build a new property on Forest Service land for a long-term lease. They would be responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of that building, but it would be on National Forest administrative property. That's something that we've been pushing for authority to do. Now, I don't know if this bill addresses that or not.
Yeah, part of it, I think part of the intent was to help address the shortage of housing, specifically in resort areas.
Great.
But I was a little concerned or questioned in terms of how long that lease was. So if someone was to utilize it for employee housing, is that short-term, long-term? So
For the investment. So I think we should, is there a deadline, George? We need to submit a letter?
I don't know. Do you have that, Ellen?
Rachel received the the inquiry from Sarah Andrews out of
Oh, y'all did.
Senator Bennett's office, and her inquiry suggests that they would love to have a response very quickly. I think it was within a week of the inquiry, which was July 19th, made on July 19th, July 14th. So I think they'd like it. I understand from the email that the senator was considering introducing this bill in a relatively short time frame, the next couple of weeks, but I don't know if that's still accurate.
Maybe we should follow up on that and look at doing a letter.
Yeah, if you can find out some more information, maybe check down it
can
with
see what
Karen
else I can
at the
find, too.
office to try to get a little more details and whether your comments back in terms of, good points, concerns, and things like that would be great. The other question I have, I missed the meeting, but I know you met recently with a group called the VOP group.
Volpe.
VOPE group, looking at traffic up at Maroon Bells, and
Yeah.
they also did some work for you at Hanging Lake. A little different situation, Hanging Lake, than the Bells, but my concern has always been, especially having read RAFTA's, the latest numbers from July 3rd, where they transported about 2,000 people up there in one day. It's, again, when we talk about wilderness experience, that's becoming more like an interest to Disneyland versus the Maroon Bell Snowmass wilderness area. So hopefully we'll have some further discussions between the Forest Service, RAFTA, and the county on that.
We are really excited about this. We managed to find a little bit of money to put into an agreement with the Department of Transportation's VOLPE, VOLPE Center, and they specialize in tackling transportation issues on public lands and surrounding public lands. And they've done a great job with the Hanging Lake effort, and while this is definitely different than Hanging Lake, they've worked on issues similar to this before, and we think that they could be just a great partner. Our stakeholders meeting last week included Pitkin County, City of Aspen, Ski Co., RAFTA, Forest Service, and the Volpe Center. I'm trying to think. There were some others as well. And we all agreed we're going to come together very quickly in the next couple of weeks and pull together a mission statement and goals on what this long-term transportation plan needs to look like, and then start moving forward with providing VolPay with some existing data that we've already collected over many years. And we want them to look at a transportation plan for the entire corridor, not just Maroon Bell Scenic Area, because quite honestly, we feel like the scenic area was built to handle a lot of people, and so far it's doing a pretty decent job of that. What we don't like to see is that directly behind that, inside the wilderness boundary, we're seeing a 1.5 mile trail up to Crater Lake is just being mangled by thousands of people a day at times going up to that lake. And then the effect on the neighborhood below the Maroon Bells scenic area and around the Aspen Highlands staging area for the buses, it's a tremendous impact on people who live in that neighborhood. So we want them to look at that whole corridor in terms of a transportation plan and some suggestions they have. In the meantime, we've got some pretty good ideas that we're going to pilot this fall during the fall leaf peeping season. We're hoping to stage folks out of the Buttermilk parking lot in addition to Aspen Highlands, and the RAFTA has agreed to take buses to Buttermilk, pick people up from there, take them up to Aspen Highlands, and then transfer them to the Bells bus from Aspen Highlands to kind of decrease the impact on parking there at Aspen Highlands. We've got a hotline that we're using this year for information on parking issues and just overall camping availability at the campgrounds in the area. So we're doing some things to try to help get information out and do a little bit better job of managing it this year. Mm-hmm. But we'll see what we can come up with this transportation study.
And where would they be parking at Buttermilk?
I am not 100% sure. That's something that we've been talking with GR and your engineers about. So,
because we've got this newly evolving parking plan there. So
right.
It's just something we need to really be working on because of the split with the ski company parking lots and our parking lots.
Yeah.
And my GR was at the stakeholders meeting and has been in good contact with this group as a whole, as has, I assume, Brian Pettit. My understanding, and Brian is here if I'm off track on this, but my understanding is that the parking will relate to the transit area of the parking in the Buttermilk lot. And that area, as you know, will be malleable. If need be, it can be expanded.
You can move the portable Jersey barriers up or back, but that's just something we need to keep in mind as we're planning the new parking lot.
Absolutely.
Brian's shaking his head like we're right on track.
Is that right?
Okay. Steve?
I see a similarity between the overnight permit system for camping and the overwhelming number of day users going to Maroon Lake. Do you think there might be a need to actually put a maximum number on how many people can go to Maroon Lake in one day and use the RAFTA seats to kind of limit that?
That's a fair question. We're trying not to run to that assumption right off the bat. What we're trying to do is move forward with a transportation study and come up with a sustainable transportation system. If that means by just changing how we manage the traffic flow, we can reach that sustainability, great. If it means that we need to look at somehow limiting through a reservation system, the bus tickets, and a timed system, we'll look at that as well. But what I don't want to do is just assume that we need to limit numbers up there.
That's going to be a tough sell. People
Absolutely.
come from all over the world to go up there and to get here and be told,
Yeah.
sorry, you're the last person that can go and the rest of your family has to stay down here.
Well, sometimes you need a reservation for a restaurant in town. So you just have to,
but I think
plan ahead.
I think it's going to be different than going out to dinner.
Well, we'll sort of see how it plays out.
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of go into it with an open mind, and the stakeholders, we had great discussion about this, and we all agreed we're not going to jump to any conclusions right off the bat. Let's look at this long term and see what kind of ideas we come up with, and start looking at solutions.
I appreciate that approach.
Greg?
Just a quick comment maybe for you're connected with RAFTA and electric buses. Wondering if how electric buses have entered into your discussions regarding bus service to the Bells and the congestion of buses at Highlands, which has been a problem. Maybe a great way to showcase an electric bus.
Yeah, agreed. And that's one of the issues that kind of brought us all together, was just the concern for the air quality right around Aspen Highlands as the buses are idling and moving in and out of there to transport people. It's been a small part of the discussion, but I'm sure it's going to be included in that longer term.
A compelling comment from somebody who lives up there, a constituent who lives up right at Highlands, and I think she was very convincing describing the smog from the buses. So
Yeah.
I'm glad everyone's paying attention and taking action with it.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Karen, for coming up and giving us this update.
Thank you all. There's more information there. I'm happy to answer questions. I know that we've had limited time here, but I'll come back again
Do we
soon.
have I forget, did we schedule normally a quarterly meeting with the Forest
Usually
Service?
it's quarterly.
Quarterly. So this is sort of in between, just because it was an update on the adaptive management plan, because it's timely. So we should be seeing you sometime this fall, I would think. Huh?
Yeah.
Good.
Thank
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Great work.
Thanks.
I found the information about the mines very interesting, of course. Thank you
It
for
is
including that.
interesting. Thanks. We're a working forest. We got a lot of different
Got a lot
things
going on.
I'll check into this.
Okay, next on the agenda, we're going to have a landfill entrance sign discussion.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I'm Brian Pettit. I'm the Public Works Director. I'm here with Kathy Hall, the Solid Waste Manager for the county. And we have talked about this sign a few times. Last time was when the staff made a mock-up of the sign at the landfill, and we happened to be on another site visit, but so we drove by that sign. And given that mock-up, staff felt that it was actually too small. And so what we're proposing tonight is in between our original recommendation, what we talked about reducing it to, and coming to a happy medium, because we just want to make sure that the sign serves its purpose to be seen and to show people where the landfill is, and not to be covered by grass that's growing there. And so we've come hopefully to a medium size sign that will work there. The details of the sign will be in Kathy's presentation, and maybe it's best for her to go through that now.
Okay. Well, again, this is our second follow-up. We were here February 14th and then back again on May 23rd. So hopefully we've got something that fits our needs. So this is the existing signage. This is both on the east and westbound Highway 82. It's ugly. It falls over. The CDOT snowplows hit them, and they end up down the hill. People miss them. They just can't find the place. So we are doing a lot of programs at the Solid Waste Center, and we're already seeing, but we expect just an increase in customers, actually people coming up to the landfill to use our facilities. So this was the original proposed signage. This is what the designers came up with. Again, it's a rustic rural sign, fits in with I think the landscape and what Pitkin County represents. It's not lighted, so pretty basic. It's a wood plank boarding with a rock base layer with stainless steel lettering. This was our first sign. It's kind of hard to see with the lights on. It was 10 feet long by 6.5 feet high, at about 66 foot square total on the front, just the one side, so double it for the total square footage, both front and back. Both of those gentlemen, the one here's dead, they're about 6 foot tall each, so you can see the sign is pretty tall. And we felt that was probably a little bit too big. So we went back and we adjusted it to 8 foot long by 5 foot high. On one side it's 40 square feet. And that was the sign we put out on 82 for about a week so you could see it. A little bit too small. If we're going to spend the time and money, make it worthwhile and make it be seen. So we came back, we hit something in the middle. So 9 foot long by 6 foot high. And this is my Photoshop editing. So you can get a feel for the gentleman standing there is about 6 foot tall. So that gives you sort of the look. And I think that's the right size. I think that fits it's visible, it looks nice, and serve its purpose. So.
Questions? Steve?
So is the 6 feet high includes the masonry base?
Yes,
That's what it looks like from his height.
correct, yeah.
Patty?
So I spent some time checking out the airport sign, and it's long, linear on the stone base. I know it's exceeded. We had to remove the first one. This one still exceeded the standard, but it's nice looking. It's noticeable. I mean, it's directional, but it simply says airport. I mean, those are the bold. So I know we talked about the language on the sign. Should we have all the stuff on it? Landfill and recycling, or should we just say, but then again, people don't always understand solid waste center. What does that mean? So I think for the landfill, we need to have landfill and recycling on there. Just because, solid waste sounds like something coming from the Aspen Sand District to me.
Correct.
So I was concerned about the signage size, both the small and the large. And I think the happy medium is where we need to go. I think, why are we putting a sign there if people aren't going to be able to see it? We're putting a sign there because we want people to be able to see where they're going. So, but we don't want it to be so big it's in your face. We want it to be directional and clean, and I think that this is probably the best decision we could make.
They also did another mock-up with the address.
I don't necessarily think we need to know
we
that,
don't
unless
need it
people are
either.
planning to mail you a check.
Yeah.
But you don't get mail there anyway, do you?
No.
Okay, so we don't need that.
Go back to that. So follow up with Patty's question. So landfill and recycling seems to make sense. I'm just curious, would we still need solid waste, or could you just highlight landfill and recycling center?
Officially, our name it was a board decree back in the 80s that we would be known as the Solid Waste Center.
Right, I understand that, but now we have a sign, and we've talked about simplifying the verbiage on the sign, and the goal is to let people know where it is and what's available. And it seems like if they know it's a landfill and it's a recycling center, for me, that seems to accomplish those goals.
I think it's fine the way it is. I mean, how many people do we still have that call it the dump, which is against the rules to call it that? But I think some people may be sent to, you need to go to the solid waste center, and they're going to go by and say, oh, that's the landfill and recycling, where's the solid waste center? That would, I think, would create more confusion, because a lot of people get sent to the landfill, some people get sent to recycling, and some people get sent to the solid waste center. That's just the nomenclature that's used out there.
Greg?
I'm still skeptical about it, but it's growing on me. You've said there's a need for it, and I believe you. I have a question to ask that if you're going 60 miles an hour down the highway, don't you want to see the sign well in advance of the turnoff? And if this one's right at the turnoff, what it tells me is if you don't know where the place is, you're going to go by it anyway and have to come back around. Are we going to keep the actual landfill signs, the ones that are tippy and falling over? I assume those are going to stay, and we're going to have those signs also. Is that still
That's
the plan?
probably a good idea.
So we're adding another sign, and if this light identifies the turnoff, I still think it's too big, but I'm willing to defer to my associates.
You think it's too big, I think it's too wordy, so.
I think it's just right. So we have the mama bear, the papa bear, and the baby
But
bear.
unfortunately, it's more than one vote required.
So Steve, make a decision here.
Steve, yeah.
Well, the size, comparing those 3 different pictures, I like the scale of this one better. In 15 years or 20 years, we might have to change the sign to say transfer station instead. So
won't
if
be here then, so-
it's, I don't know how it's going to be constructed exactly, but some future board might have to decide to change the name of it.
The letters off.
To the dump.
I think if we can make it adaptable, like with maybe just put it on 4-inch posts that are, have plenty of room for a chainsaw blade under in case it needs to come down quickly.
The monkey wrench gang to come in.
Just kidding.
So,
I think we should move forward with the way it is. The smaller, the in-between size.
I'll second that if that's a. If
We can't really vote, we can nod.
just a nod.
What is the anticipated cost to do this? And if it gets built and all of a sudden everybody thinks, oh my gosh, what have we done? It needs to be smaller. how hard would it be to make it smaller?
Where the chainsaw comes in.
The original estimate from the designers back in February was for the larger sign. They estimated probably about, they kind of came back in, it was about $8,000 to $10,000. They maybe let's go a little higher, about $12,000. So we put it in that range. We have budgeted, it's in our budget for 2017 for $20,000. So.
Okay, so it wouldn't kill the bank if we did have to change it in the future.
Right, and it may be possible to design the sign such that you can reduce the height and then change the lettering if it does prove to be too big. So maybe there's a way that you just don't throw the whole sign away, that you can augment the existing sign to reduce its size.
Makes sense.
So we'll look into that as well.
Great, thanks.
So, you guys comfortable with this?
Yeah.
I guess you're good to go.
The lettering and wording and everything? Is this-
Finally.
It says.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Where are we? 150. We're just slightly ahead of schedule, but I see that our citizen board interview is here.
She's
although
here.
I haven't seen staff here. I don't know. Is Phyllis was anybody coming up from
Lisa
staff?
coming, do you know?
I do not
Lisa,
know.
was Lisa coming up or not?
Thanks, you all.
An email.
We could do future agendas or something, maybe.
Oh, well,
Got 10 minutes.
Yeah.
shoot. I can't tell what time it is.
It's 1:50.
Well, let's go to future agendas. That's a good idea, Patty, just in case Lisa is going to show up.
Yeah, I mean,
I have a couple changes on future agendas.
Okay.
One, the August 2nd, there's a ambulance facility open house listed there August 2nd. That's not going to happen that date. It's going to be, I think, the week of the 22nd of August. So it's going to be later than that. So that's
Okay.
not happening on that date. Let's see. The presentation with the auditor is listed on August 15th. It's going to be moved to the 22nd. School board agenda, Rachel and you, George, are not going to be attending that.
Correct.
So the school board's been contacted, so they know it's an incomplete board, and we'll see where that goes.
and is that at the district meeting room? It just says school district. I'm assuming it's at the,
At their meeting room?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that,
we
but
need,
we
probably
can
need where
find
to
that
go.
out.
And the other thing about that meeting, can I just chime in on that?
Sure.
Northwest COG just informed me, just by random, I sent John Stabney, the executive director, something that Steve would be attending the meeting this week, and he emailed me back saying, oh, by the way, we're moving the meeting, we're the host jurisdiction, they failed to include me in the decision to move the meeting that we're hosting at the airport to Gypsum that day, which means I can't go to the Northwest COG meeting because I need to be at the school board meeting. So it was nice of them to bring me into the discussion, because now the meeting that we were supposed to be hosting here is being held in Gypsum. I'm assuming it apparently came from somebody from the Glenwood Springs Town Council who said you don't want to go to Aspen because of the bridge. So, because I had said come over the pass, because most of the jurisdictions come that way anyway. So I just will be attending the school board meeting and not attending the COG meeting, unless I can do part of it by phone. But it's our major planning meeting. It's our big meeting of the year, so it's the one you need to be at in person. But they've kind of just excluded me from being there.
Okay. All right.
And the only other one, August 22nd, there's an added item at the end of the day, so 4 p.m. So it'll be a regular long meeting. Will be a fueling options for the fleet department. They're going to do an hour presentation on that.
Right.
And
George,
that's all I have on that.
All right. Well, make a note so when I go over this in a week or two with John, we could revisit this day because it looks like we may be able to even start a little earlier too. So
On the 22nd?
Yeah, because right now we have an exec scheduled for 11 a.m. Oh, is
That's
that?
Akron.
That's
for me.
accurate, so we can't go earlier. Okay, but
So
I'll make a note to talk about
I have a favor to ask.
that with John.
I will not be present for the CDOT meeting on the 1st of August. And last year, I asked them to look into doing a down valley merge lane for the people coming out of the boat ramp area at the Carbondale boat ramp site. You know, just at the Carbondale Bridge, just below the Carbondale Bridge, there's that major boat ramp. And the traffic coming in and out of there, people with boat trailers, is significant. And there's no down valley, so if you pull out and make a left turn to go pick up your boat, which they do, they drop it off there, pick it up downriver, there's no merge lane. So you're just literally thrown into the fast lane going eastbound. So if somebody could ask them about that, I've not heard anything back from them. There's a median in the middle, so they would be able to put that lane in without a lot of impact. There's one every other direction on that, except for that one does have a merge lane, and except for the one that's probably the most critical. So if somebody,
going towards Carbondale on the,
now, if you come out of the boat ramp and you turn down valley to go towards Glenwood, there's no lane for
Okay.
you to merge
and is there
into.
one going
Every
up
other one,
towards Carbondale?
yep, every
Okay.
other one has a, they have two right turn lanes that have it, and they have, if you're pulling off to turn into the boat ramp, there's a turning lane. So if somebody could remember to bring that up for me. Somebody make a note, because I won't be here. Can you add that maybe for Peacock if somebody doesn't remember? Because it's a significant issue, and I just want to see if they're looking into it again.
Okay.
That would be great. Thank
So
you.
merge onto 82 heading down valley from the boat ramp.
It's Gateway Boat Ramp, I believe is what it's called.
It's never been noted on the TPR funding list, I can tell you that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a minor thing. It's more of a safety issue. I think they could get money through the safety rather than on a major TPR list. I think it,
Well, we can ask.
yeah.
All right, anything else, Phyllis?
Nope, that's
Anybody
my
else have
list.
anything on future agendas? Okay. Lisa did show up, so we waited. So let's go on. We have two citizen board interviews. The first is Zika Child, who's here for the Healthy Rivers and Streams. So Zika, why don't you come up?
Ziska.
Zika, I'm sorry.
Not the brain-eating virus.
Not Zika, but Ziska. I never thought of that.
Don't be so sure.
Exactly.
So welcome, and thank you
Thank you.
for applying. I'll start off. What sort of prompted your interest in this particular board at this particular time?
Nothing more important than water, and that's a timeless thing. There's no particular point in time to be interested about water, just always, because it's the western slope. Although we're at a very challenging point right now. And I think that we're at a point that, in my experience, between the Front Range and the western slope, we're really right down to the bare bones of where are we with diversions, where are we with reservoirs, all of this. I mean, we've got so many straws in the drink right now that we're really at a crisis point. So I think it's really come to a head. As far as my personal interest in it, and why now? Because there's an availability on the board.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the proper time to apply.
Right, good point.
Yeah.
Thank you. Patty?
I want to thank you for applying, and I want to say it's very exciting that you applied. You have a great deal of history. We've known each other for a while. Great deal of history in this valley. Great deal of history with the water in this valley and the needs and the users. So I think you could bring to this board a great deal of experience and knowledge. It's a huge learning curve. Water is not an easy topic. And I think knowing you as I do, you would not be afraid of that learning curve.
Alzheimer's has not kicked in yet.
And I also know that you have the availability to commit to this board. Lisa, how often do they meet?
Once a month.
Once a month?
Not
and
a
then
problem.
they go on really fun field trips. So I thank you.
Questions? Steve?
Ziska, you and I have talked different times about agriculture and the use of water, and you've experimented some with, different ways of getting by with less water on your own place up on Missouri Heights. Do you want to describe that a little bit?
Sure. The main caveat for me is I'm looking at your current board, and I'm not a hydrologist, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a rancher. But I do have 36 acres of beautiful sagebrush. So I have been experimenting and looking and researching ways of trying to improve the soil quality on a completely dry land ranch. And, of course, starting with the least expensive and the least invasive first. And I have to say the one that I'm going to trot out to the front of the line are these little Groasis water boxes, which are working mostly on condensation. I mean, you put 5 gallons in the bottom of this plastic donut, and you put a tree in the middle of the plastic donut, and then you cap it off with something that actually promotes condensation. I did that in 2013, and I have not added water to them since then. Now, granted, you start out with something really small, but they're not dead yet, which without water up on Missouri Heights, and between 2013 and now, the lowest moisture I've had for a year-round accumulation is 6 inches, and that includes snowmelt. And that's desert. The best I've done is 13 inches with snowmelt. And to have something to continue to grow in those kind of conditions without having an irrigation system on it, I think is pretty exciting. Now, the mob grazing I've also tried. I've had somewhat less success with that. And that mostly is due to the time at which grazing is convenient for the people who own the cattle. Although I have great hopes for that from what I've seen up at the Coal Creek project. And what I haven't tried yet, which I would love to be able to try, is what Morgan Williams is doing with biochar, to extend that beyond what they've been doing with mine reclamation, which is fantastic and very applicable to healthy streams. But I know Morgan and I have talked about his experiments to put together a biochar fertilizer that you'd be able to put on the back of an ATV and just spray out the way that you would a regular pasture application to increase the soil, the moisture content in the soil by allowing that biochar to just drink in more water. And the one that I think is probably least applicable to this area would be keyline plowing, which is what they've done. It originated in the United States, but they've done it a lot in Australia. They've had a great deal of success with it down at the Circle Ranch in Texas. But I think we grow too many rocks in order to have plowing actually work. You could be spending more time lifting that plow out, trying to find out where the rock is, and it's got to be 18 inches of clear that you've got with a knife edge plow to get in there. And I know the land up on my property is great for building and lousy for growing. I could build houses with that clay all day long, but it did break the tooth off of Chris Preuss's backhoe when he tried to dig a perk hole in it. So I don't think plowing is a great solution for my property, but it may in fact be a better solution for other properties to, again, just get more moisture content in the soil. So mostly what I've been looking at is ways of, well, I'm kind of skip ahead with this. What I see is with our global warming, what we're seeing is more water content in the air. And to the best of my knowledge, the state of Colorado has not regulated the air yet. They've regulated rain, but they haven't regulated the air. And any way that we can promote to get that water out of the air and into the soil is something we should really be looking at.
Interesting.
And thank you for that question.
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Good information.
Great.
I just wanted to say that I've known Ziska since probably middle school, and she's always been provocative and challenged me and everyone else to think, and she's full of ideas and alternative ideas, and I think it would be great to have you on this board or on any of the other boards we've on the topics we've discussed, which have included housing and transportation and so many other things. But I'm enthusiastic about your application here. So thank you for coming in. And I can't think of a question other than that. How would you see? One of the things I'd like to see more of, coming off the Healthy Rivers Board and learning about issues we have currently in the county and in the Upper Valley. How do we all get along with city and county? Do you have any insight on that? Because there are issues regarding water, as we know, and other things. It'd be interesting to hear your perspective on that, or how you would approach it. Maybe we don't need a solution from you right now, but just how you would approach.
I just walked out of the meeting up at the Volunteer Fire Department on the landscaping rules, the new landscaping rules for water, which will affect some properties in the county as well.
Well, maybe.
They're claiming it's going to be 30 properties in the county that they're going to slap those regulations on per year.
The city's going to do that?
Yep,
Interesting.
because it's on the city municipal water system, and that's their criteria, is the city municipal water system. Now, what I heard there was a lot of permitting talk, and we kind of all know what that sounds like. And I would say there were, maybe 4 people that were from the private sector sitting around that table, and I didn't count, but I'm going to guess 25 people from the city and the county represented. So as far as discussion was concerned, it was a lot of talk between departments that I would have hoped would have talked before they did a presentation to the public instead of learning about things for the first time.
Interesting.
So I would, the only answer I can give at this point in time is I think we've got to stop siloing. I think we've got somehow to get avenues of communication within our bureaucracies, talking to each other within the bureaucracies, to have them talking to each other, one bureaucracy to the other, and make that presentation to the public when you finally get to that point something better than a PowerPoint presentation, and something easy, good, solid sound bites, and just, make it as user-friendly as you can, instead of just making it so dense that, I've got, 12 sheets of paper down here with a lot of information, but you get down to the legend on the map that they gave you, and the legend's this big, and all it says is the different colors are referred to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, not actually telling you what those numbers denote. So I think there's trying to make the information friendly. Really, really friendly. That I think would be a major, major goal, either between the city and the county and between government and the electorate. I don't know how you do that.
Thank you.
And thank you for forgiving me trying to drown you in your kayak back in the Jerome.
Cece, I've got 2 questions. One is, you're a resident. You live in Aspen.
I do.
So you would be filling the in-district seat, not the out-of-district seat?
Unless you want to include Garfield in that out-of-district, although that is not my primary residence at this time.
Okay. And then have you served on any other community boards in the past?
I have not.
No, so this is the first one.
Lucky you.
First timer.
All right, any other questions?
Oh, this is great.
Well, thank you very much for applying, and we should get back to you. Do we still have some applications coming in, Lisa? You might come.
Yeah, so we're hoping to.
You might want to come up.
We've had some interest from some other user groups, maybe some kayakers and fishing guides, and I think a few people are on vacation, so we're hoping to maybe keep it open for a month or so.
Okay.
We can do that.
So we'll wait, and there's other
September.
applicants to come in, and then we'll sort of see how that works.
Yeah.
Could I just interject one thing? Regardless of who serves on this board, I've been in communication with a friend of mine who serves on a water board on the Front Range, and there's going to be heavy participation for the Bureau of Wildlife Management discussion in Steamboat in the first week of September on the Poudre water project and those reservoirs, and that might be something that the county commissioners here want to look into and see if they want to lend their voice to that discussion.
That'll probably be something that's brought up QQ, which is the Water Quality Board with Northwest Colorado Council of Governments, and Rachel's active, but that's a good heads up for Rachel, what to remember.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. There is a note here that I think maybe Lisa put in here. Ken Newbecker, who had applied earlier, has reapplied, and is there, would people like to would we like to re-interview him at some point or not?
I don't think it's
I
necessary.
was not at his first interview, but I can defer because it's just me. We had great discussion about him when we were making our decisions. So
And we could always, you can always watch that interview on
Yeah,
Grassroots.
Yeah, I think even, I would go back and, before deciding, I would go back and look at the interview just to refresh my memory on Ken, but
you could keep me in
we
on
would
the
ask
date.
him the same questions we did previously, I think. And
Yeah, maybe Lisa, if you can just shoot us an email
How we can access that.
when that is viewable, would be great.
I understand, Lisa, our video is online for the RISD run, isn't it?
Well, the opening.
You have to
The
come up to a
opening.
mic if you're going to talk.
The opening party's online?
Yeah, we have a video online of the opening, the dedication. You guys are coming down the waves, and it looks great. It's about a 3-minute, I think, video, and so we put it out on Facebook on the.
Did it take us 3 minutes to get down the river? It seemed a lot
Yeah,
faster.
John talked a little bit about the RISD and the
So you did
reason
that.
for the whole thing, and yeah, it
Oh,
was
great.
pretty cool.
I'll
It's pretty
pull it
fun.
up.
You guys need to check it out. Yeah.
All right, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
Okay, let's see. We have another citizen board interviewee. This is Jason Janes, if I pronounced that correct. And Jason is applying to the Redstone Historic Preservation Board. So welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
So you live up in Redstone. That's one of the requirements.
Yes, I live on the boulevard.
You live on the boulevard. And so what sort of issues you think are happening up there that would require your expertise or your interest, involvement?
Well, I think if you'll indulge me for just a minute to talk about why I am interested, and it relates directly to that. I've previously been on the board and for family reasons needed to move away from Redstone for a couple of years, and have recently moved back. And so my tenure lapsed, and so now I'm back again to seek that seat once more. And when we first moved to the valley, we spent a lot of time up the Crystal because it's obviously a very special and beautiful place. And as we spent more time up there and started looking at moving into Redstone is really when I started to learn a lot more about the historical significance of Redstone and of the properties. And it's obviously a very interesting history. It always amazes me how recent that history is in terms of kind of time, over the course of the history of the development of the West. And it really is the story of Redstone and the story of the development of the coal mines and Osgood is, in my mind, it's a quintessential part of the history of the development of Colorado. And so I see that as being extremely valuable in and of itself. And then I know that people are attracted to both live there and visit there because that history is apparent beyond just the beautiful setting. And so that's, I guess, my way of understanding the value of the HPC as it exists now in protecting what does remain of the original development of Redstone. And there isn't a huge amount of development pressure. There are very few lots left. There are a handful of historic properties that have been well preserved and are being well taken care of. But I do see the value of the board in being that liaison for when properties may turn over or when new properties may come on for development. I understand, I sat on the other side of the table for that process because we built our home on one of the few empty lots on the boulevard, and so went through the application process. And I fully believe that process made what we ended up building more appropriate for the boulevard, and I understand, sitting on that side of the table, that sometimes that's a little bit painful. People don't like being told that what they're doing maybe isn't quite right, or feeling like maybe they're being told what to do. But ultimately, what we built fits in better to the fabric of the boulevard, and I appreciate that the HPC at the time gave us that guidance, and now we are proud of our home when I look up and down the boulevard as it relates. People actually come up to us and ask when we renovated it. Was it one of the original cottages, or those kinds of questions? And to me, although we're not mimicking what's there, it tells us that we did something right, and that the HPC did something right by Redstone in giving us the direction that they gave us. And I think some of the challenges that exist are oftentimes have to do with the messaging and perception. And the HPC as a guiding board is there to receive requests when property owners would like to do something. And I think oftentimes there's a public perception that the HPC is the kind of the heavy hand of a design review board or something like that. And we've talked about that quite a bit on my previous tenure on the board, and I understand that that's really, it's up to us to get the message out about what we really are to do, what's our purview and our purpose. And so I see the individuals of the HPC being ambassadors of that message, and really making the point that the group is there to protect the character that is bringing people to want to be there in the first place. I think that's extremely important. And I know that there are challenges with the dividing line between the land use code and the county authority over enforcing land use code versus what the HPC does. And sometimes those two things kind of bump up against one another. And I think it's very important that we understand where that line is, and we navigate that carefully because of that public perception of what the board is and what the board is for. Sorry, that was long-winded.
Well, you covered a lot of material, so that's great. Thank you very much, Patty.
So I think in what you said nailed it for me, and I would like to welcome you to the board. You had just not just the information that you just told us, but the manner in which you did it, and your ability to work within the difficulties or the successes and the failures and the fine lines, I think, is much needed.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, Steve?
I noticed that you had worked on the project at Aspen Valley Ranch, and we're all quite a bit familiar with that, having
Yes.
gone through the land use process with them. I was just curious what your duties were there on developing the plan, and were you involved actually in the preservation of the the historic buildings on the property, or was it more on landscaping, or could you describe that?
Absolutely. I'm a landscape architect by training, and practice with DHM Design in Carbondale. And so we provide site planning, landscape architectural design, and ecological services out of our office. And so we were retained by the owners to assist with the land use process. So in developing the revised land use plans that were an overlay of the previous approvals that existed on the property. And a part of that was the preservation of the historic buildings in the core. And so we, as much as anything, from a site design perspective, it had to do with the appropriate setting, the appropriate character in the core immediately adjacent to the buildings. We weren't directly involved in the physical preservation or renovation of those buildings, but we were a part of that team.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
One more question. Based on your previous experience on the board, would there be any changes that you would make now if you're on the board again?
That's a good question. I don't think I have a ready answer right off of the top of my head. I think one thing that we have talked about, I've been sitting in informally at the meetings, since my tenure lapsed previously. And we have talked about because there isn't a whole lot of development activity in general that comes across the desk of the board, oftentimes the meetings will be fairly intermittent, and making sure that we're meeting regularly enough that we have the ability to engage with the public who may want to come and talk to us about what we're looking at or what we're thinking about, or at least continue to be kind of up to date as a group. Of course, it's a very small community up there, and word gets around, the rumor mill, what have you. Word of mouth gets around very quickly, and I think oftentimes it is important for the group to meet and make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to things like messaging and what we're looking at, concerns that people are seeing with changes on the boulevard. So I think structurally, the board functions very well, and when we've had applications, from my experience, when we've had applications, that's been dealt with in I think, a very respectful and delicate manner, because we're oftentimes sitting across the table from our direct neighbors, and there's not much space in between the membership on the board and just being a resident. And so we're very careful to do that. I know I personally am very careful to make sure that we navigate that in a way that's appropriate and respectful. And so I personally wouldn't change anything about that necessarily. Mm-hmm. As it relates to the actual guidelines, there have been conversations on the board about updating those simply as it relates to keeping them pertinent and allowing them to reflect what we're actually seeing on the boulevard. And I think that process has been appropriate. I think it has been important as well. But no, I don't see any huge sweeping deficiencies or changes that I would want to make.
Greg?
Sure. Just wanted to ask, I noticed you listed Camp Hale Memorial and a war memorial in New Jersey, maybe some other public spaces.
Yes.
Tell us just a little bit about your history working on public projects like those.
Our practice is very broad, and so we do quite a bit of public work. And DHM Design as a company was founded doing a lot of work for the National Park Service, and so we continue to do a lot of work for the National Park Service all across the country. And that oftentimes does have us working in some both very sensitive environments and in very important cultural and historic sites. And some of my first work was in Rocky Mountain National Park at the livery, the horse stables there, and in an amphitheater. And having that understanding of how to make those facilities functional for the modern world, but still retain that historical character is very important. And throughout the course of my time at DHM, we've worked on a very broad number of projects of historical significance. The Wheeler House was something that was ongoing in the office when I first started, so that's been quite a while ago. I don't know. I could probably come up with a list, but there are quite a few. We've worked with some architects who are focused on historic preservation, so we end up in civic and public buildings, particularly in small towns on the western slope. We see quite a bit of that. Those civic buildings are really what create the historic fabric and framework of some of those small towns, that civic square. And so we've been fortunate to work on a number of projects like that. So.
Great, thanks. It's interesting.
Any other questions? Yes.
I noticed that the vacancy is for a regular member, and there is already an alternate member on the board.
She opted not to have her position moved up from alternate to regular.
She wants to stay as the alternate? Okay, that was my question.
Suzanne, are any other applicants coming in that you're aware of?
No, I've had one other person suggest that they might be interested, but they haven't taken any action.
Good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming in and reapplying.
Yeah,
thank you.
Again, and
Great
we should be able to
talking to
get
you.
back to you shortly.
Great. Thank you very much for your time. I
Jason.
appreciate it.
Thanks for coming in.
Okay. Let's see. We're going to move on to a prep for the upcoming joint CDOT meeting, August 1st. So this is timely. Patty, you could have saved your
Yeah,
remarks.
I know, I should
but
have said it
that's all
later
right.
than sooner.
You could remind Brian as he's writing notes
I'll
down.
remind these guys for you.
Okay. And then I went, oh, God, I should have brought it
Staff
up
is
here,
here
not
to
there.
take notes anyway, so that could be included.
That's right.
I'll go move my notes.
Huh?
I'll move my notes.
Yeah, I see, move. So,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
I'm Brian Pettit, I'm the Public Works Director, and this is the annual CDOT meeting that's coming up August 1st at 11. And so this room will be full of CDOT officials to talk to you about how the year went and what they expect to be coming up. One of the issues will certainly be Senate Bill 267, which will provide about $1.8 billion to Colorado roads and how that will be distributed. I know this past Thursday, the Transportation Commission had a lengthy discussion on how that could work. Other topics that are on the docket possibly are the city wants to ensure that any upgrades to Main Street is in the State Transportation Implementation Plan, or the STIP, so that that work can take place with CDOT authority. And another thing that has come up is to make sure that we get our detection system installed this year up the Independence Pass. So those are the three topics that staff has identified as possible conversation topics for us. CDOT will have a full-on presentation. I have alerted BOCC, Town of Snowmass, RAFTA, and the City of Aspen that this meeting's taking place because they would like to watch that transpire as well.
How much time do we have for this?
It's just an hour.
It's just an hour, and not. I'm not saying this negatively, but this is an annual dog and pony show where all their staff come in from all the different departments and they make the presentation. So there's not a lot of time for discussion. We can highlight some issues that we would like CDOT to look at and hopefully come back to us.
Perfect, yeah.
Yours will be example,
So,
but we're not going to have a lot of time for give and take, just for those who haven't seen this presentation before. But with that, if there are any other things that you want CDOT to be aware of, if they may have time to do some quick prep on, that would be great. So
Yeah,
Patty first.
I have one, and I brought it up during our, well, I should have brought it up now. First, would everybody please give my apologies, because I'm usually here for this meeting, and I will miss seeing all the familiar faces. But I brought it up last year. It was the acceleration lane coming out of Gateway boat ramp, just below the Carbondale Bridge. There's that meeting in between where they do have room. They could put an acceleration lane westbound acceleration.
Toward Glenwood.
Right, so when you come out and you're pulling your boat trailer and you're heading down to pick up your boat, you don't have to jump right into the traffic that's flying down Valley. So I just didn't know if they had been thinking about it. George brought up, what about in their funding system, but I think that might be one of the issues they could manage with some of their safety funding. That's kind of a different pot. So if you would just ask them at that meeting if that's still a thought, and then I would like them to continue to think about it, because I think it's a huge public safety issue. That boat ramp is packed with business, and those people are coming in and out of there all the time, and that's the one lane that's not there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Steve, then Greg.
There are issues related to the bridge closure that if we could have a short discussion about that, and maybe they'll work that into their presentation too. Different concerns I have are if there's an early snow on Independence Pass, I would like them to keep it open do whatever they have to keep it open, even if there's snow.
Didn't they say they were planning to do that anyway? Aren't they considering that?
Just a reminder, ask if there's anything that they would like us to pursue, like trying to keep more construction traffic up here, like parked up here at Buttermilk or things like that we could discuss. And then also I'm concerned about the level of construction that's going on in the valley right now that's going to be really annoying to people, like all the stuff at Elgibel is just half built, and our bridge, the pedestrian underpass is not complete, and all those sorts of things are going to add to the general aggravation. And if there's any way they can expedite helping get those projects completed enough that it helps the flow of traffic farther up the valley, I think that would be good on people's tempers and patience and everything.
Okay.
Greg?
I had a couple things. When you mentioned Independence Pass, I've heard a couple times that Cottonwood Pass has been discussed as being taken offline certainly for big trucks. But I'm wondering if they have plans for people using Cottonwood Pass. It'd just be nice to have an update on that, because that could be a choke point and a scary one, depending on the weather in the fall. The second thing is the issue that I brought up before regarding wildlife crossings. And I know there was a conference that I attended with CPW and CDOT. They put on together, and I'm wondering if anyone there could include maybe just a brief update on what they're doing in the way of identifying wildlife crossings and moving that forward. That's something I think would be interesting here. The final thing is, and this is somewhere down the road, but bike lanes. We're starting to see a revolution in electric bicycles, and I think some of them are capable of traveling on a bike lane on the highway even. And I'm wondering if CDOT is prepared for the commuter revolution on electric bicycles, whatever size that's going to be. I think it's coming, whether we like it or not.
Okay.
All right. I'm sure we won't get through all of those, at least in depth anyway, but they're good points for future discussions with CDOT.
And it is good, so I'll put a list together and send it to them so that they're prepared for these questions. And it helps them prepare for that meeting and make it efficient. I'm not sure what you have going at noon from a meeting standpoint, but I know that last year we ran over as well.
Let me just see real quick here. When are they coming in? Next week?
Yes, August 1st at 11.
August 1st. So let's see.
A week from today.
We've got an exec session, then we have lunch break, and then we have, we'll have a little time, a little
spillover.
You know, we could sneak another 10 minutes or so. But anyway.
Okay.
They've done this more than once, so.
Yeah. Yes.
So they're coming now before the bridge closes.
All right.
Those are great. Well, they can get here.
It's not going over the pass.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Was GR here for the same reason? No.
No, Brian. GR has an item for open discussion.
Okay. Well, let's move into open discussion. We're running ahead of ourselves as long as staff is here.
Okay.
And Phyllis, we are running a little ahead of ourselves, so let Laura know if she's coming up from Basalt.
Okay.
And
Kathy Chandler maybe too, because she's going to come over.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, George. I'm GR Fielding. I wanted to bring something before the board during open discussion. It's not often that we bring information about some of the permits that we're receiving to the board. But a few weeks ago, I was approached by a representative who is helping establish a not-for-profit LLC to be a new utility in the county, and it will be called the Castle Creek Broadband LLC. They have Decipher Technology is a local company, and they're heading up this effort. And they have a client who lives about 8.5 miles up Castle Creek Road who is trying to set this up. And as of right now, they've brought in a permit. We're waiting on some of the permit documents. But they would like to start installing a fiber optic line up the Castle Creek Valley to supply both the owner of the property at about 8.5 miles up Castle Creek Road, but also allow all of the folks that they pass with that fiber optic to be able to tap in. They're setting up their business model right now. They say that they're going to be competitive with, as far as rates, with other utilities. I don't have that rate sheet yet, but we can supply that once we get it. What they're talking about is a very significant project. It'll leave a bit of a wake. When we have these larger utility projects, the last one that we had that was pretty big, I think, was the gas line, when they redid the gas line going through Woody Creek and up Upper River Road. These, not only do we have this permit that's going to come forward, that would probably be fall and next spring in construction and lane closures on Castle Creek Road if they were going to trench and bury this line. But we also have all of the then subsequent people that would be tapping into that line eventually. And all, Midnight Mine, if there's anyone up Little Annie, Conundrum, all of those other things, I think we could foresee into the somewhat immediate future.
So, do they have to go before ComDev as part of a normal land use application?
Well, in this case, if they stay within the right-of-way, typically that does not go through land use.
Would they go notify the caucus?
Yes, and they have been talking to the caucus. I know that I just left a meeting right after lunch with the representatives for this project, and they've already talked to Joe Wells with the Castle Creek caucus, and then they were going to follow up with him after our meeting today and this with him this week.
And then have they had discussions with our staff who are involved in our broadband initiative on a bigger picture?
Yes, they have. The first meeting that we had, Kara Silvernagle was involved with, and we're trying to keep everyone up to speed.
So it seems like that, at least for me, I'd like to have some information how that might tie into our broadband initiative, the work that Phyllis and Kara is doing before I would want to make any decisions, have sort of a bigger picture.
Their plan is a fiber plan up the Castle Valley, and ours is fixed wireless, so we wouldn't be installing fiber to those locations. So they're really kind of independent, although it will help what's going on.
And then how about, I'm a little confused, would they be the provider?
Mm-hmm.
So they would be a provider, and of course what we're doing is we're sending out RFPs for providers to elicit
for our broader system
applications to encourage people to not just to sort of skim off the top, but to also be able to provide service into some of these less populated areas.
And the less populated are going to be more on the fixed wireless solution. Running fiber into those areas, actually running fiber up the Castle Creek will be a very expensive endeavor. That I think that the group that's being created can do that, which is pretty unique.
Is this 8.5 miles up? Is that like to Midnight Mine Road? Where is that?
No, this is basically around where Martina Navratilovan's old place was, Martina's old place.
That's why they have the money to put this system in.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll end there. But
Patty?
I have a question. So it'll have to then hook up somewhere coming through the city.
Yes.
Down Castle Creek. So the city has to be involved in this. The other thing is, after the meeting we attended last night about the Castle Creek Trail, that also needs to be brought into consideration. We don't want them running a line that then we have to deal with it if and when we were to put in a Castle Creek Trail that may or may not affect that line. That needs to be a heads up, because I don't want us to then having to be moving their line or doing something with their line at the end of the day and costing us more money on that trail.
Well, with a lot of these, and as it's going to be set up as a utility, that's done through what we call a license agreement, and that's what our permit generally is. And so, by and large, whenever there is a utility in a county right-of-way, it is the responsibility of the utility to then...
So if we needed to work in our right-of-way for the better of the public, they would be responsible for mitigating any impacts to their line. I just want to make sure that we're not having to come back and... if this was to move forward.
But that being said, Patty, I was there last night as well. I've been very apprised of the Castle Creek Trail project. I'm on the project team right now, and we will do and try to get everyone together to make sure that whatever we do in one effort doesn't preclude the other, and that they can work in harmony.
Keep all of those people happy up there. That's your job. Good luck.
I feel that might be a little bit difficult sometimes, but...
Greg?
I'm just wondering what the likelihood will be that the neighbors up at 10 miles will want to run it up up that far. Well, that's part of the wake you're talking about. And the next question was, could the end of this line be a head-in for a wireless extension or something like that? Do you see this being something that could become useful to the entire valley, and how far would the reach be?
Well, I think to answer a few of those questions, as far as usefulness to the entire valley, yes. If someone at 10 miles up then wants to, there is going to be capacity. They're talking about putting in what they call 288 strand fiber. That's pretty substantial fiber optic cable. I don't know a lot about fiber optic cable, but that's a pretty big cable. It'll get smaller as it goes up the valley, but they're building in a lot of capacity. We've asked them about, what would be available at the end of that line, and if we ever did change our model for broadband or all of these other potential, safety or radio or whatever the future may be, there's going to be a lot of bandwidth available there. I do think that the other thing that they're, that they're going to try to have as part of this is, I know that Decipher, the company that they've hired to head this up, also sells a broadband solution for in-home cellular service. And so, the people that get their internet through this can probably also buy an in-house cellular service type of thing. So there's a lot of different technology available once you get that capacity up the valley. It might not be the same model that we're looking at for our initiatives, George. I think it's fairly similar. I think that it's being set up as a utility, so that's how they'll have to operate under the different Colorado laws. And by those same Colorado laws, we have a bit of a need to help facilitate them within the right-of-way as well. Right now, a lot of the details we really need to shake out what that looks like. I've talked to Mike Kramer a little bit about this just before I drove in, and we'll try to figure out where this project lies, how we're going to permit it. We don't know. They're ready to trench, bore, and be able to hang the line on any available poles that might be there as well. They have a lot of questions to get answered still before they get going as far as work, but from my understanding is once they get those questions answered and they get a permit from us, they want to get started as soon as possible.
Interesting.
And I'm assuming that we're talking with the attorney's office?
That's one of our next steps as far as going through and talking about if there's any additional items that we might not need to permit through this, because we do a lot of utility permitting. We do all the time. We do gas lines. We do connections to the gas line, water lines up Red Mountain and Mountain Valley, and connections to those. And so this falls into that same parameter. It's just a different order of magnitude.
So if they install the fiber optics, and you mentioned that there's a company that would be interested in coming in to providing cellular service, that service would be open to other providers, so it wouldn't be a monopoly up there?
I think it's in-home cellular service, which means you can, if you have broadband, you can use your cell phone over the broadband. I mean, that's the new technology that's out there. It's going to be more widespread soon. But
and
right
this will
now
be a private. I mean, it's a public-private kind of a entity. Their own LLC, so I don't know how much governing we would have as far as rates or discrimination or opportunities. I think that's why it's unique, and we need to have the attorney's comments involved.
Right, and that's something that we've been very forward with them in the meetings, is that was my office's anxiety as well, is that would be really cool to get internet service up there. However, we know that, from a political body, there's going to be some anxiety about, are you guys going to have that, that monopoly, and are you going to be competitive with if, someone was trying to pay for the same service down in town?
Because I heard there are some issues with the one going up the pass, which was Comcast, and some of the prices that might be involved in that. I don't know what the actual prices are, the cost, but...
Well, a lot of times it's, it's the initial capital improvement that's the costs, and then providing that service is usually somewhere around that same rate after the fact. But
Yeah.
providing that initial capital up front, and I think that's a bit of why this is so unique.
Because that Comcast line went a long way up the pass.
Greg?
Just wondering, you talked about undergrounding and possibly lines on poles. Do we have the ability to regulate where? Are we going to see new lines put up, overhead lines, for instance? Are we going to go up and see a new power line or communication line stringing through the trees up there? Is that a new thing we can anticipate?
Well, what I can tell you is that right now, I think their assumption is that they're going to trench as much or bore, depending on what becomes more cost effective for them. But the conversation did turn to if there is availability, if they're allowed to cohabitate on the existing utility poles that go up the valley. The difficulty there is that some of the public utilities that extend up the Castle Valley that are on poles, I believe it's the electric, are not necessarily on the road right-of-way, but they cross private property, and so they are on an easement. And so I don't know enough about easement law to be able to tell you if they would have to do their own poles in a different easement, or if they'd be able to cohabitate those poles that are existing. So I don't know that. And I also, that would be one of my questions as far as what we can say as far as that from the attorney's office. But we do have overhead lines existing up the Castle Valley right now.
With Holy Cross.
Yeah.
And Holy Cross, we know in their easement issues said that if we we have to amend all of our easements if you're going to run fiber on it. So that would be up to the easement holder and the utility. So.
And that's what's happening somewhere else in the valley where people are using the poles and have negotiated use of the poles, but they now have to go and perfect the easements
all the way along.
All the way along.
So,
but if those property owners want,
they're probably wheeling and dealing.
as staff is pursuing a lot of these questions to get answered, does this ultimately come back to the BOCC, to the board?
That's up
What's
to
the
the
process?
board's discretion, because typically these types of permits are handled administratively, but if the board were to give that direction.
I would like to see it come back just so we're in the loop.
In
the loop, no pun
This is a
intended.
little more complicated. I think it should come back to the board.
Yeah.
Well, like you were asking, George, that there could be some advantages to wherever that line is, because even cellular service needs backhaul somehow. They want to be in fiber. So if there's fiber, they need fiber and electric. They've had electric, they just haven't had fiber. So there could be a possibility of cellular up that valley. General, and maybe a good business model for them to lease some of their fiber if they're putting that much fiber in to either the providers that we're trying to attract into the valley. So there's another option of wireless or wireless broadband or cellular wireless.
Bet they're
Yeah,
thinking
I
of
just
all
want to
their
see how if it's a public-private partnership, how we can really be able to piggyback or utilize this to expand that service.
I agree, George, and I think that one of the big parts of this, though, is with that project comes a capacity that probably wouldn't have been that feasible under different circumstances.
Saying it nice, gently.
All right,
I
great.
think, I'd like to
That's the problem
back
we
just for
have here.
information, just for knowledge for us. Great.
All right, thanks, JR.
All right, thank you.
So we'll come back to open discussion, but I see I still have some staff here. We're due for a break at 3, so why don't we get Mike Kramer up here. It's an upcoming photo and video shoot at Elk Mountain Lodge.
Speaking of the Castle Creek Valley.
Speaking of the Castle Creek Valley, Mike Kramer with Pickens County Planning Staff. And as the board knows, community development handles permitting for special events, which include film shoots and photo shoots. And ComDev has received an application for a photo shoot at the former Elk Mountain Lodge property, including the 2 other properties that abut it and are all under the same ownership. And the reason I'm here is to brief the board, and if the board wants to provide any direction to staff or comment on the application, we would certainly take that direction and comment. But I'd like to just quickly outline what the application is and its significance, and why I'm telling the board about it. The application has been submitted by a firm out of Los Angeles called The Institute, and they are a production company firm, and they are proposing a still photo shoot and some minor filming at the, like I mentioned, the Elk Mountain Lodge property. 125 participants, I should say, and that includes production staff, models, and the people that would support the film shoot are proposed with the application. The application is for a brand clothing company, and the dates for it are August 11th through the 14th, and in general they'd be filming and shooting all day, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. with 2 night shoots that go into the 9:15 range, 9:15 p.m. There is proposed to have food service for the participants of the film shoot on the property, and all that would be delivered to the Elk Mountain Lodge property. And food service provided by the Pine Creek Cookhouse. As always, staff takes these applications and processes them and refers them out to the caucus. And Castle Creek Caucus, I say that loosely, they're yet to be traditionally formed, but Joe Wells is the head of the folks up there. And we did receive significant public comment on it. And we had 14 residents of the Castle Creek Valley provide comment. 6 of those residents supported the application. 8 of those residents did not want to see the application go forward. So I wanted to bring that to the board's attention. And I also like to say, too, that when the application was submitted, there were some concerns by staff. Obviously, the impact of having a film or photo shoot of this size has a possibility and potential to be impactful to not only our residents here, but also people who are using Castle Creek Road. One of the major concerns staff had was getting people to and from the site and impact to the county right-of-way, which is Castle Creek Road. The applicant has represented that all equipment would be brought up to the site on August 10th, and the equipment would stay on site until the conclusion of the filming and be removed on August 15th. We had concerns about the actual traffic impact of getting models and production people up to the site every day. The applicant has committed to staggering shuttle vans up to the site. People will not be allowed to individually drive vehicles up to the site to get up to the photo shoot. Staff had concerns about the night portion of the shoot, and originally the application proposed to have an 11:30 p.m. Photo shoot into the night. Obviously that's impactful. It's impactful having lighting. We certainly did not want an X Games type lighting situation up the Castle Creek Valley. The applicant has reduced that evening shoot to, like I said, 9:15 p.m. And they also have made some pretty detailed representations of what the night shoot would be. And it's a more of an individualistic photo shoot of a model, and it appears that lighting would be extremely minimal. One lighting device with an umbrella and a filtering device too to not produce glare. I'm not a lighting expert, but it seems minimal, and we do have photos and pictures of what that would look like. So that was a concern. We also had concerns about the use of a Los Angeles firm coming to our county. Staff in the past has had trouble with out-of-state firms proposing film shoots and photo shoots. And in this situation, because I've never met this person, I have no clue who this company is, we did request a face-to-face meeting with this Los Angeles company, and the head of production came to meet with staff on 2 occasions to talk about the shoot, to get direct contact information, so that if anything happens, we can get a hold of this person, and we have a person on site who will be there to address any impacts. So with that, I wanted just to bring that to the attention of the board, and if you have any comments or direction for us, we'd love to hear it.
So, Mike, a couple of years ago, we revisited the special events permits for shoots, and can you sort of refresh our memories in terms of what we came up with in terms of what we would allow and not allow?
Sure. So you're exactly right. In 2015, the board amended the land use code to make changes to better address special events and filming and photo shoots on private property. And with that, we adopted code provisions to make requirements for adequate provisions for parking, for potential impact to county facilities like county right-of-ways, requiring safety and operations plans for special events, requiring adequate insurance so that if something does happen, we have insurance that names Pickens County as a certificate holder and as an additionally insured. And then we also limited the number of events a property can have to 3 per year. This would be the first application submitted by the Elk Mountain Lodge property, so they're within that frame of being in compliance. But that was the gist of what we adopted those code amendments for.
We talked about length of time for shoots in particular, and I thought we talked about a little leeway if the shoots were inside in terms of the hours versus outside.
We did. Those were actually good. That's a good memory too, because we amended it once in 2013, and then we amended it again once in 2015. And the 2013 amendments actually produced an exemption from getting a permit if you have a film shoot that is less than 15 people, less than 3 vehicles, and is conducted all within an indoor setting inside a residence. This is not the case. They don't meet those threshold limits, and they do require a permit.
So the lighting outside up to 9:15. It's hard to envision what that would look like and how that might impact the night sky. I mean, you're looking at a pristine upper end of the valley there, Castle Creek, and how that might impact the night sky up there.
We have representations from the applicant showing that. And I could hand them out if it helps, but this is what staff requested, was just pictures of what this lighting would look like. Can I just give them to you?
Porch light on
Pass it
somebody.
around.
One is an umbrella and some lighting. Another one is the lighting device that would be used.
You need to be on a mic.
Oh, sorry.
The podium works?
Sure.
Yeah.
So one of the pictures is of the umbrellas and the lighting device that would be used. Another one is actually a previous shoot that used this lighting. Another one is an action shot of a photo shoot where they've used this screen and the lighting. And I'll just pass these around here, so y'all can see.
And then as you're there, Mike, 125 people, and you said they're going to be utilizing van shuttle service during the day. Do we have any idea? I mean, as you know, that road is heavily used by multi-users. Certainly bicyclists is one of the most popular bike rides in the summertime. And is this, I haven't got the dates, is this over a weekend or?
The shoot, I don't have a calendar in front of me.
I've got a calendar.
Do you? Okay.
So
Yeah, sorry, I didn't prep
July, August 11th is a Friday, so it's over a weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you've got not only normal traffic up there and bicyclists, but you also have still sort of the one of the busiest weeks left of the summer.
So can,
Yeah, Pat.
you know, in light of the fact, we used to have multiple events up there, weddings especially, with a lot of prep. Sometimes, rehearsal dinners and people coming and going, and we always used the shuttle service. Great venue for that. We haven't had that in this last year or so. So we're talking one event where we could have had multiple events. I think if we're really careful about the transportation issues, we want to be least impactful on that road. I think that's critical. I think George's point about night sky, but if they're only going till 9:15, they won't have very many lights because, there's still some dusk time in there. It's not like 11:30 I would have definitely said no to. I think that when you do a film shooting like that, it's not going to be a long period of time. I think we need to be very careful that those requirements that we're asking are followed, and I think they need to know that if they're not, we have to have somebody monitoring this, because we know that when people come in from out of town, they can come in and just say, well, we're going to just do it. I don't want it to be, we're just going to do it mentality. I want them to know that we mean it, and that if we don't, we'll shut it down. And if they violate, we're shutting it down. And I don't care if it's the first day they're done. And they need to know that. If they put their mouth, they got to put their money where their mouth is, and we're going to follow through with that. I think that's critical.
Just to add on to that too, Patty, the applicants have requested and will pay for, if a deputy is available, a sheriff's office employee to be up there during the shoot, not only for eliminating or minimizing impact to Castle Creek Road, but also in the event there might be gawkers or people who are stopping to watch this happen then too. So we have contacted the sheriff's office, and they're checking their scheduling and seeing if a deputy can be up there and be paid for it.
I think that would be critical. And if it's not sheriff, it should be somebody else on county staff that can follow through with this for us.
Okay.
Greg?
No, and this hasn't come up yet for me, but this was I was involved in production for many years, an entire career in it, and I've worked up there and all over the state and the county and the world on production. And so looking at the lighting scenario, those are just kind of samples of what lights look like. It'd be nice to know, how big is the grip truck? For instance, is it a 10-ton or a 20-ton grip truck? Are they going to put a lot of lights up? Or when they say it's just one light, those lighting diagrams, one's a strobe for still photography, the others were movie lights, hot lights were called for movies. So it'd be nice to know just what they have in mind, because often these things do get a little bit larger. They tend to swell.
Yeah.
And I worked as location manager for many years, and even though I thought I was informed, things would come in and just bowl me over with how big they got and how quickly. And so the thing I'd like to find out is, is it a still shoot or is it a movie shoot? That's a difference, because they're showing us samples of both there. And just how elaborate is the lighting scenario outside? Are they going to try to light up the whole ranch grounds, or is it really just a light on one person standing out in a small area? You kind of think if they're going to do it up there, they want to show the backdrop and the scenario. They could be trying to light the whole property for all we know. It'd just be an interesting question. And the second thing was, I like the idea of having a film commissioner in our county who can work with productions, because I think production's a great thing in many cases. It employs a lot of freelancers like me and friends of mine who depend on that in our valley for additional income, and it's actually a good thing for communities in many cases, and for other reasons as well. But the other thing I wanted to find out is, are they hiring any locals? That'd be an interesting question to know. How many locals will be hired to work on this?
Other than food service?
Other than food service. And is there a location manager who's local? Because that makes a big difference if they know who's who and how to get things done and who to talk to, who to call when they have a problem. That's another one. And finally, is there a completion bond, or is there a damage deposit? Say they dig a trench, with a vehicle that gets stuck, or they dig a trench to hide something, they chop something down. Do we have a completion bond or a deposit from?
So if they do any damage on the
a damage deposit, yeah. It's not uncommon to demand that from a production anywhere in the world.
You're talking about damage on the private property? Cutting down a tree on the private property would be
That's
a
an
violation,
issue with the landowner, I'm sure,
Yeah.
maybe, but I'm just wondering if they decide they want to stray off the property, are we going to be prepared for that? Will they know what the rules are? And I guess in a case like this, perhaps if it's all on one private property, we don't want to include a deposit, but it's something to think about as we go down the road. These things tend to swell a little bit, and I'm supportive of it, and I'd love to see it happen. As Patty said, I remember going to a concert up there many, many years ago. It was loud and it was noisy and there were lights and everybody, it was done by 10 o'clock or whatever, and it was all fine afterwards. So we know they can do this successfully. But those are the things that pop up when I hear about this.
I think we've been lucky that there have been multiple events up there, so we've kind of had a little break. So not saying we want to start a trend, but I think we need to find a way to provide for this, but we need to be very clear on what our limitations are, and that we're going to stand behind them.
And they can tell us more, I think.
Yeah.
Perhaps they have already.
Some of those things they have, and some of those they haven't, but I will request that information though.
Mike, have you gotten feedback from ACES or the Historical Society? Obviously, you did from Pine Creek because they're supplying the food, but
It's not a publicly noticed application, and staff relies on sending it to the caucus head to distribute to the caucus members. We did not specifically send it to ACES or the Historical Society, but there's enough time where we could and notify them of that.
Well, I think we should.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Just let the people up there know.
Yep.
Other questions or concerns?
I'm okay with this. I've been involved in several photo shoot things over the years, and you know, the impact is temporary and it provides some income to the community, and it's really interesting actually being involved in a shoot. It's an experience I'll never forget. So I'm in favor of, you know, when we have opportunities to have ones that are, you know, the impact's mostly going to be on one property there, and minimal impact on the rest of the community, aside from, you know, the traffic getting up to it. But then, so did you say the length of time they're planning?
I did, and
It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday? Is it Thursday, Friday?
Yeah, the actual shoots which would be photo and video shoots, August 11th through the 14th, and start time would be 7 o'clock a.m. and completing at 9 o'clock p.m. and 2 evening shoots that would extend to the 9:15 time frame. Yeah.
Okay.
One last thing, George. It is a large crew. 125 people does kind of. It's not just going to be one little light, as we can probably tell, or one talent out there with a crew that large. The type of lighting is another thing. Just if it's one of those balloons that they fly over the building and bounce lights off of it to light the whole lodge, for instance, something like that is going to be seen all the way up for miles up the valley and down, like the X Games lighting.
I don't think it's going to be that impacted, but it's something we should
perhaps not. But it'd just be nice to know. So if something like that happens, we're aware of it, and maybe it's noticed, so people aren't shocked.
We don't allow it.
It's the shock factor, right? Not knowing it's happening.
This is a work session.
I was just trying to provide information to answer some of the questions.
You need to come up to a mic.
Mike, we started this presentation a little earlier because I didn't realize this was going to be a little more in depth, but I saw Joe Wells out there.
Was Joe out there too?
So I don't know whether he's...
He might have come. He did ask what time the work session
Kathy,
was
want
going
to
to start.
just see if you catch Joe, tell him we're in the middle of this discussion.
I just wanted to address...
Who are you?
Gideon Kaufman, for the record, and I helped the applicant prepare the application. I worked with him to come in to meet with the staff because I know there have been questions and concerns in the past. So I want to address a couple of the questions that you had. The bulk of the shooting is taking place inside. Okay? And also, when the question, which is a very valid question, are they going to light up the mountains? When you pay as much as you do for these models, you focus on the models and who they are, as opposed to just the scenery. So there will be some shoots outside of the lodge, but there's no intention, and there's going to be no lighting. Mike made it very clear we can't have any drones or any of the things along those lines. And Mike asked me to give you the maximum amount of people that were going to be there. So when most of the time there'll be under 60 people, there's only 2 times when there'll be the full people. And in order to try to compress the amount of time that was involved, they're doing photo and videos on 2 days at the same, so that there'll be less impact and everything. And as Patty pointed out, I want to remind everybody, I know all of us have been to shoots at Elk Mountain Lodge. They had a permit for 52 events a year, up to 300 people.
That's all changed now. So
but I'm saying that this is the first request in 6 years.
Yeah.
So it's not as if it's something ongoing. In meeting with the staff, they're shuttling. They're bringing all of the equipment up one day and breaking it down the next day. They're being very, very sensitive. We followed the suggestion of hiring a sheriff's deputy to be there to make sure that everything takes place. And the cut is, if you go up to that valley most of the summer, it's still light at 9 o'clock. This is mostly going to be a dusk shoot on those 2 nights that they're there, and it'll be, all done by 9 to 9:15. Again, we think it'll be done by 9. Mike said to be cautious in terms of making sure that we represented everything properly. We gave a full list, Greg, of all the materials that are going up there. And so I think this group has done as good a job, and they have hired somebody local to help coordinate with the shoot as well. So I just wanted to answer any of those questions. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
No, that was helpful.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Gideon. Joe, you're here for this. Mike gave us some information in terms of the comments, remarks that came from the.
I don't need to embellish on the remarks that we've already submitted. So. Okay.
All right. So, what I'm hearing from the board is we want to have make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. All our concerns are in there, that there will be repercussions if they sort of go beyond 915 or they whatever, if they're not following the exact permit requirements, that their permit will be pulled, just so everyone is up front, and because these things do have a tendency to sort of go beyond sort of the boundaries if no one's really watching them.
And if there's not a sheriff, I think we should still have somebody monitoring, whether it be a deputy or somebody. I think
we do have code enforcement. We can.
That would be great if we could have somebody present. That would be helpful for them and for us.
Especially knowing that 9:15 is the witching hour, and so we're not. Well, we have one more shot we want to make, and you know how long that takes, Greg. One more shot could be another half hour, an hour, and it's very easy to abuse that. What I see is really a privilege because it is a very pristine valley. I remember seeing the photo shoot that got way out of hand on Hanging Lake.
The model standing on the log.
Standing out in the middle, So it's easy to when there's an outsider coming in to sort of say, oh, let's go over here, let's go over there. So we need to be careful and just to take into account all of our citizens and not just an outsider who wants to do a shoot up here.
Understood. And the repercussions for not having compliance with the permit is, one, we can shut down the photo shoot, and two is the institute out of Los Angeles, California would not get another permit in Pickens County.
Yeah, we mean it.
All right.
One last thing. Yes. I don't want to come off as sounding too harsh. I know how things can go over. If there's a chance, say the clouds are perfect and it's magic hour, it'd be nice if they anticipated that they might want to extend if they need to extend. So I'm hoping they're giving us realistic end times, just so that when the director says, "Oh my God, I have to get this," I'd love to be able to say, "Sure, it's in your permit, go for it." But as long as they're realistic, that's all.
No, yeah, I would not support that, Greg. I think 9:15 absolute. We've got the night sky that is a major concern for all of the residents here, and so I would not extend any further courtesy, frankly.
All right.
There you have it.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Gideon.
Thanks, Joe, for coming in. Let's take a 15-minute break.
Freezing over here. Laura.
So let's see, next on the list is we're going to have a discussion about our library board alternative appointments.
Yes, I'm Kathy Chandler from the library, and I'm basically just here to answer questions and perhaps refresh your memories. This process started back in March. We had our first two candidates came and interviewed with the Board of County Commissioners, and they were Ashley Connolly and Elizabeth Nix. And after they had interviewed, I had said, well, I could talk to the library board to see whether the library board wanted to change their bylaws in order to make room for two alternate members, and had said that in the past one time we'd had several people apply for the library board, and we did that as sort of a temporary measure to make the library board a little bit bigger. And so the library board thought that that would be a good idea for succession planning for the board, and had agreed to do that. And then consequently, we had a couple more people apply for the library board. So I believe that Charlotte Anderson has given you folks the applications from those 4 people, and also links to view the interviews online if you wanted to do that. We did have a library board meeting and approved this bylaws revision on first reading, and then we had a special meeting to make final approval as far as the library board was concerned, and then it came back to the Board of County Commissioners, at which point you folks approved the bylaws revision, and that brings us to today, I think.
Thank you, Kathy.
Do we have 4? Don't we have 4?
Yeah, the other 2 are Georgina Melby
And David.
and David Bentley.
Okay.
Okay, so, and the alternates, they don't have any voting rights unless you don't have a quorum.
Actually, if someone is absent, then the alternates will take turns from one meeting to the next, being the substitute person who gets to vote. So in the past, when we had alternates, an alternate was basically looked at by the library board as just another member, except for those rare occasions when there's actually something that's being voted on, which doesn't really happen that often. It's approving the budget to come before you folks and things. It's usually kind of ruled by consensus, I would say. So the library board did ask to put in the bylaws that they would be expected, an alternate is expected to attend the library board meetings on the same regular basis that a regular trustee is expected.
Which is kind of the same rule of thumb for any other board.
Okay, so where would the board like to start with?
One question I had has to do with David Bentley would need special provisions for, if he were one of the ones appointed, for either having somebody write things down for him or having I think there's an electronic thing where actually the voice, what people are saying gets written down automatically on a computer screen.
That should not be part of our decision at all.
Well, I wanted to make sure that we had a provision for, if he were the one, would we be able to provide that service to him to be able to hear and know everything that's being said at the meeting?
We don't have that type of technology on hand. I guess we had anticipated people writing notes and
yeah, and I know we'd be required to do it, but I want to make sure we have the capability to do that before we make our decision.
That should not be part of our decision-making process, Laura.
I missed it, I'm sorry, guys.
David has a hearing disability. Can we bring that in as part of, can we accommodate for that as far as an appointment?
You would accommodate for it. That would be part of your decision-making process.
We would just, if we appointed him, we'd accommodate. Oops, sorry. Yeah. We're good.
All right, yeah, that's...
Well, can I jump in?
Please.
I'm comfortable. I would like to in remembering and reviewing, Elizabeth Nix, I think, has some great background, especially she brings in an aspect of the children's library part, which is such a huge part of the library. I would like to see her appointed as one of the alternates.
I had her on my list for those same reasons as well. Just with the writers' conference,
Right,
and
right.
so that would be good.
I was struck by both Ashley Connolly and Elizabeth Nix, who were Ashley's, I think, been here most of her life, was a psychologist, seems so committed with her family and her kids and so passionate about getting involved in the library. I actually, quite honestly, I like all of the candidates, and I wish they could all be involved somehow. But I agree with that regarding Elizabeth and Ashley as well. I know David. I've known him very many years, and I know how passionate he is. If I'm supposed, are we supposed to be choosing 2 out of the 4 right
Yep.
now? I guess I'm gonna say I would love to give David Bentley a chance at this because he's been here and so committed for so long. And I'm gonna say Ashley Connolly be my 2 choices.
Ashley and Elizabeth? No, Ashley and
I think
Elizabeth.
that's yeah.
Ashley and
With
David?
Elizabeth in there, close second. I could switch to Elizabeth if we had to do it to break the tie or something.
I looked at all of the interviews again yesterday, and Elizabeth and Ashley, I wasn't actually there in person, so I absolutely needed to watch the interviews. But I rated Elizabeth as my first choice. I thought she would provide, the best, a different perspective. She's the writer and, the professional writer for the History Channel, and she uses the library a lot, and it's the mother of a first grader. I think she would be really good on the board. Second choice was really hard because it was like 4 good candidates, and I don't think we could go wrong no matter who we would appoint. And I was, I'm torn between, I actually really like Georgina Melby. Her background as an attorney, and she worked in the library in college for 3 years. She's fairly new to the community, but she could bring an outside perspective. But then David Bentley he's so passionate about the library, and we worked at the Aspen Times and at Explorer Books, and he's been working with words and print for his whole time here. And I think I would give him the nod for my second choice.
So you've got Ashley and David as well. And Greg has Ashley and David. And Patty, you had Ashley.
I have Elizabeth.
I had Elizabeth.
You had Elizabeth.
Oh, Elizabeth. I'm
Elizabeth and David for my first and second.
I think I said Ashley. Yeah,
You said Ashley.
but
You said
Elizabeth is so
Ashley.
strong,
I have
too.
Elizabeth, but I'm not sure about second.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I got this. Steve.
I had Elizabeth for
And
my
David.
first choice, and
Yes.
then David is my second.
And again, so this is a little unusual because we've created 2 new positions as alternates. So it's allowed us the opportunity to bring in some people, as has been stated. They were all very strong candidates, and that was one of the reasons why we asked the library board to consider creating 2 new alternate positions, because of the great applicants and the great interest in our wonderful facility.
So now we need 4 alternates?
No, I don't think we were pushing the envelope, but I'll just throw my 2 cents in just to get this conversation moving along here. I would support Elizabeth as well for the reasons that have already been stated, and I would support David. David has applied in the past, not only this last go around, but even the last time there was a seat open, and I think we should give David the opportunity to serve. So those would be my 2 choices.
I'll support Elizabeth and David. I just think, David, there's been some concern, so we just need to kind of keep an eye on how things pan out.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need a resolution for that? For all
It'll
we
come
could
back
do?
to
It'll
us.
come back to you tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
When you look at tomorrow's packet, you'll see.
Will it?
It'll be
Be that done that quickly?
We have one tomorrow, but it's about somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I have a
How
question.
how would Charlotte have been able to do this already? Because we just decided right now.
And we could have, no, we have one tomorrow for the youth appointment to the Human Health Services Fund.
Anyway, if it's not tomorrow, we'll have it in 2 weeks.
She says packet material to be handed out at a meeting, and what she said was she was waiting on your decisions today.
I have another,
Oh.
but we have another one, the Board of Adjustments. We had a gentleman apply, and I would like to appoint him.
All right, well, let's talk about that tomorrow.
Thank you, Kathy.
Because we need a
If we're going to do it, we might as well do them all.
What are the appointments that were on the list, Phyllis? We've got the,
I gotta go into the tomorrow's meeting.
We have the Human Health Services Grant
There's no
Fund.
packet yet.
Human Health Services Grant Fund. We have the 2 youth positions.
well, I guess I've gone for that.
We appointed him, but we never did a resolution.
Okay, so we need.
We had the Board of Adjustments, we just interviewed him, we have not appointed him, and he's the only applicant. And then we have the library.
This might be in there for her.
And I think we're still on hold for Redstone, because we don't know if there's any other people coming in, or we could move that one forward.
We
too.
were on hold for the Healthy
Rivers
Rivers,
and
Healthy Rivers and Stream.
But I could appoint Jason, too, to the Redstone. I think he'd be a great asset.
I asked Suzanne that question. She was not aware of anybody else who was applying.
So we could do that one, too.
So we could do Jason. If that's
I'd like to
agreeable
keep him up to speed here while
to
we're
everybody.
So impressive. Great to hear.
So do you get all that, Phyllis? No.
I'll go through it. 2 appointments to the youth appointment for the Human Health Services, the Healthy Community Fund Grant Review Board. 2 youth. We have a gentleman to the Board of Adjustments, and I don't remember his name, but we just interviewed
I
him.
have his thing in here and I'm looking.
So it was a recent applicant for Board of Adjustments. We have the 2 to the 2 alternates to the Library Board.
Not that one.
And we have Jason, who we interviewed earlier today, for the Redstone.
For Redstone.
Thanks, Patty.
You're welcome, George.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So let's go back to open discussion. Phyllis, do you have anything?
I only had the one item that we got from Senator Bennett's office on the Forest Service leasing bill that we sent out, asking for a letter of support. It was just interesting that Karen didn't know a whole lot about it, but
I thought that was interesting, too.
So let's wait, and I think Ellen was going to try to do a little more research for us. And
yeah, and they need the letter from what the email says by the end of this week.
Yeah,
So
they'll
Well, they might
they'll
get
take
when
it
they
next
get
week.
I don't know if he's introduced it yet anyway. I don't
Yeah,
know.
Okay.
they would take
So
it next
we'll wait
week.
on Ellen.
Yeah.
I think, it'd be nice to know what all there is in that, because
Yeah. There's not a lot in what she sent.
not a lot of detail there. Yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable rushing that.
I think maybe they wanted it by this week because they're getting ready for their August recess. So, which means nothing's going to get done anyway.
Before
Nothing's
next
going to get done
Tuesday.
anyway, regardless.
They might be out of town after today's vote anyway.
Yeah. Okay, good.
I have one from last week.
Patty, yes.
It's, I think I got the board's nod for supporting the 50th anniversary of Ruggerfest by doing an advertisement in their program, not supporting the event itself, but doing a, congratulations on 50 years of rugby or something. I did get information about pricing. Full page is $900. Half page is $495. Quarter page is $295, and an eighth of a page is $175.
All right, I must have missed that discussion.
We talked about it briefly, and knowing that the board does not support sporting events, like the Motherlode volleyball, we don't give money to the actual event. But in this case, because it's a special 50th year anniversary, and I thought it might be appropriate for Pickens County to support them by just saying congratulations on 50 years. And so if anybody else came back into us and said, will you put an ad in so-and-so's program, we could say it was their 50th anniversary. It was a significant event.
Where would the money come out of?
It would come out of our discretionary fund, which I think we have
There are
$6,000 or
lots of-
$7,000 left in.
There are lots of 50th anniversaries this year. It's the 50th anniversary of the Deaf Camp. It's the 50th anniversary of Aspen Valley Land Trust. It's the 25th anniversary of Open Space and Trails.
Wilderness Workshop.
Well, this is something
And the
we,
Wilderness Workshop is the
Snowmass
50th.
Village.
this is something we don't usually support. It's their program. I don't think the other events get their revenue to support the event with a program.
And I think it would be appropriate for Pickens County to do something because it has been part of Pickens County's history for 50 years. Originally played on Wagner Park, which will be again, but which used to be Pickens County's park till the county gave it to the city.
I guess I'd be comfortable with it as long as we're comfortable with all the other 50ths too, for the same
Well,
reason,
if they
because
come
they're all
back in and approach us, we
If
can
they
consider
approach
it.
us. But then maybe just do it on a small enough scale that it's not a big hit, like a quarter page maybe.
I was thinking a quarter page at $2.95, and I can have Pat draft something up with our Pickens County logo letterhead and some simple,
I think I would do a bigger ad, but I would include all the groups that are having a 50th anniversary.
This is the
this year.
Ruggerfest program.
Oh, in their actual program.
It's in their
Not
program.
in a newspaper thing. Okay.
That's in their program.
I was thinking this was like a newspaper ad.
This is the Ruggerfest program,
Can we
and
just
they
have one
asked
that
me
says-
if Pickens County would help support their.
I'd like to have one that's a question that says, what was going on 50 years ago? 'Cause there's so much of this, so many things were initiated then, 67.
And there's no fee that you have to pay to go to their 50th anniversary celebration at the parks and the games like you do to all the other events, like the Deaf Camp, you have to pay a fee, and the Wilderness Workshop, you have to pay a fee, and blah, blah, blah. So it's a free event for the people of Pickens County to attend, and I think it would be good to show Pickens County support in the program.
I'm okay with it.
I'd be okay with it. Do it out of our discretionary.
Come on,
fund.
George. Come on, George.
We got three
Come
of
on,
us.
George.
Yeah, I
Doesn't mean you have to play.
I'm fine with it. I have a hard time seeing the linkage, frankly. I mean, that discretionary fund we really use for not only for emergencies, but also for those who really are in need.
We also use it to defer the price of events for people when they have to pay permitting fees. So we've done that a lot. When they come in and ask us to waive their permitting fee, we take it out of our discretionary fund.
That is where that comes
So
from.
we do, yeah.
So, in that same vein,
I heard a quarter page at $2.95.
please, that would be great, and I thank you very much.
Yeah, quarter page.
And
Thank you, gentlemen.
what's your relationship with the rugby club?
I don't play rugby anymore. Nobody in my family plays rugby anymore, and I'm no longer the team nurse for the rugby club. Thank
Lucky
God.
you, not being, yeah, I was going to say.
My son said he suggested he might want to play, and I said absolutely no way. And he's going to be 32 years old, and he still came to his mother to ask permission.
Okay, it looks like the majority of the board says move
I
forward.
have one more
I guess that was
open
yes.
discussion item.
Yeah.
It has to
I'll
do
send
with
this on to Pat.
bicycles, and I see three issues that are out there. And some of them are already maybe being dealt with, but I want to bring them all up as these are timely issues. One has to do with the issue of e-bikes, and on August 9th, the state of Colorado definition of bicycles is changing to include electric bikes. And the city of Aspen on August 9th is going to start allowing e-bikes on their trails within the city limits. And I think that our Open Space and Trails has been talking about it, and that's really their bailiwick in terms of the county trails, to have them decide that. But that issue is out there, and because of the August 9th turnover on the state law, that's a timely issue. There's an issue of bikes crossing off of our bike trails onto public roads and not stopping at the stop signs. And Willie Fender called me up, and Francesca has nearly hit two people coming off of the she's coming off of the highway, and people are crossing the Sopers Creek Road on the Rio Grande Trail and not stopping, or maybe there's a visibility issue there is kind of what I gathered, but it's a dangerous situation that the cars are coming off the highway and they really need to move through the intersection and clear the intersection. And so somewhere I saw a little blurb that somebody in the county is studying that issue and I don't know if it was Open Space and Trails or who was looking at the issue of bikes crossing without stopping, and they were thinking maybe we needed better signage or
We have stop signs there, Steve.
better
We have stop signs.
yeah, or better enforcement or better education or something, I don't know. Then the third issue has to do with licensing and taxation, registration of bicycles, and I think it's representatives, I don't know if he's a representative or Senator Scott from Grand Junction is planning on introducing a bill in the state legislature this year which would require some sort of a taxation of bicycles so they could pay some of their share for using the public roads. And Willie Fender also brought up the idea of, there's no way to identify a bicyclist on a bicycle if there's some incident. They don't have a license plate on there or anything, and there's, they can ride off, and then they're an unknown person involved in an incident potentially. And he thought it would be a good idea to do some sort of have the bikes registered with an identification number on them. And so it's, three separate bicycle issues that are kind of timely ones right now. And I don't know if we'd want to get some more background information and perhaps do a work session agenda item on it, or just to get more information on what's going on.
Well, the crossing the Rio Grande Trail, there are stop signs along the entire corridor for bicyclists, and just like there are speed limits for all motorists. And so the bicyclists, they have to take. You have to take one's responsibility, and as a driver, because I'm through that intersection all day long, the drivers have to also be aware. In fact, at that intersection, we have just recently changed our signs from yield to stop for cars. So if someone is not stopping, if someone does stop, they have the opportunity to have a quick look to see. Now, it doesn't address the cars coming off of 82, and they've got to turn in pretty quickly. I agree with that.
But there's not much.
But there is a deceleration lane there, and one can look really quickly just to see if someone is a bicyclist or a pedestrian is skirting through that intersection on the Rio Grande Trail. So it's education, and I think we've got that as well signed as we can without having a traffic light. That discussion in terms of that bill, I read that. It's a proposal. I think it's going to run into a tremendous amount of resistance from the outdoor recreation and from the bicyclists. So I would wait before we weigh in on that. But this governor's announcement in terms of identifying our e-bikes as eligible to be on all Colorado trails, I think, in fact, I was watching a Snowmass town meeting, and they had that discussion, and they are opting out of that for right now, so they can have more time to see what the impacts, safety concerns are of that. So I don't know, Laura, if we wanted to look at that and see if we want to have that discussion next week, because the Rio Grande Trail, that discussion will happen with open space in the fall.
It's gone, yeah.
And I'm not sure if the city, when you say the city is allowing e-bikes on their trails, I'm assuming it does not include the Rio Grande Trail. Because right now e-bikes are not allowed on.
It was actually Pearl who told me, and she just said on the city trails. She said on the city trails.
City trails. So but the Rio Grande Trail is one of the only trails that e-bikes, electric motorized, are not allowed. So it'd be interesting to see if we want to opt out for right now while Open Space has that discussion. RAPT is having that discussion for our August meeting as well as a temporary solution to help mitigate the traffic for the Grand Avenue Bridge.
Yeah, and I think the newspaper article on the town of Snowmass Village, they adopted a moratorium, I believe, and the issue the big issue for them was a lot of people who donated the easements did so with a provision that it was for non-motorized vehicles.
Right.
So then now they're gonna
They'd have to go back and amend
figure
it.
out and either amend them or wrestle with that issue of the new state law versus, the motorized versus a bicycle kind of an issue.
Yeah.
I think it's something we need to address. I know Open Space has got it on their agendas to look at. When does this thing, the governor, when does it kick in? Is it going to be like starting tomorrow or January 1st?
August 8th.
Oh, so it's tomorrow, pretty much.
Well, but I think, again, you could check, Laura. I think we may have the ability to opt out.
My understanding is you do. I'd have to go back through, but we can put something together and put it before you before the
That'd be
deadline.
Yeah. And
I think we
I
should
would be
have
in
that
favor of doing a moratorium until Open Space and Trails discusses it and then brings us a recommendation.
Well, I don't think we'd have to do a moratorium. I think we just
Or
could
whatever-
opt
however
out
we
and
do
opt
it.
back in at any time. We need to
Yeah.
find out what those provisions are.
August,
I think we need to address it because it is happening. It is here, and we have a population of demographics who we want to encourage them to be out and about, and if they need to get up a hill and need some assistance, we need to look at that. We need to look at the different opportunities of e-bikes, the governing systems, governors that they have on them, so you can kick them in, or in the speed limits and all that. There's not just one model that's out there.
Right,
It's an
that's right.
evolving technology.
yeah, one second, but Laura, if that came back to us, would we need a resolution, or would it have to be at a regular meeting, or
It'd be a resolution. It would have to be a noticed meeting.
so we could do a special meeting at our work session
You could.
next week? Okay. Thanks, Greg.
Just wanted to say that certainly the issue of e-bikes they're here. I've seen so many e-bikes on the roads already, and I've seen, but I think the other issue that we see is just this time of year, so many bikes and so many users on Rio Grande. To add more is going to be a scary topic, and I know there have been some incidents. Somebody maybe in the county was saying that they've had several incidents on Rio Grande Trail, perhaps with citations of people on e-bikes or collisions, not necessarily with e-bikes, but just bikes and pedestrians. As that trail is loved and used, it's getting a little more dangerous. A friend of mine was hit and put in flight for life to the Denver hospital for 8 days about a month ago, and you see it coming, and those e-bikes are so alluring. I think they represent a great opportunity, but they're also we need to be very careful with it.
My experience with my brand new e-bike that I've only had a couple of weeks is, it's limited. When it's in the electric mode, the electric motor cuts out at 20 miles an hour. It's a federal regulation.
On some of them.
No, I think it's a
Well,
federal.
there's two different types, Patty. There's an E pedal,
And
and
a
then there's a
throttle.
throttle. And the throttle, you can go a little bit faster.
And
So that's what I'm saying, there's
so,
different
Right.
but I think speed is more of an issue. I've gone more than 30 miles an hour just in the pedal mode going downhill on this very bicycle. And there I know that, a speed of a quiet bicycle coming by somebody, if they don't announce themselves and they're coming up on a pedestrian and don't announce that they're coming, it's just a recipe for, scaring the living daylights out of somebody or having them get scared and jump and get hit by the bike, or a horse getting scared and bolting and all those sorts of things.
I think people are renting. They're renting e-bikes in town now, and I don't think they're inhibiting or not recommending they ride on the Rio Grande. So there's some issues there.
Education, too.
But then also,
We could talk about
supposed to
that.
one
have
more
those as
part of my experience is, and it takes some getting used to, and if somebody just rents one, it's their first day on an e-bike, sometimes it will do things that you are not anticipating. Like if it's in the pedal assist, if you're not pedaling and then all of a sudden you pedal one half of a turn, the bike will shoot off real quickly, or it can, if depending on what setting you have it on, and that's a recipe for somebody having an accident and running into somebody unanticipated.
So I trust you guys will take care of it next week. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so
And it may be next week or the week after because it actually goes into effect at 12:01 a.m. on the 9th. So you
Okay,
guys
great.
have 2 work sessions.
All right,
before
great.
then.
So,
but we'll make sure.
So
that
it
we
is
get
an issue we're going to have to deal with, and we should try to get ahead of it or allow time for us to
Start the
address all
discussion.
these issues before helter skelter takes effect. Thanks for bringing that up. Anything else for open discussion? So with that, I will call to order a special meeting, and I will accept a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of Cougar Canyon under CRS 24-6-4024A, Holland Hills easement litigation under CRS 24-6-4024B, and Darrow contract dispute under CRS 24-6-4024E.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, Grassroots. We're in exec
Thank you,
session, so
Grassroots.
we're going to go up to the
the clock tower.
clock tower.
Now we sound so ominous. Clock tower.